Hey, what's up my titans of time? It's your boy Chronos, back with the next epic chapter you've all been waiting for. Today, we're diving into part 2 of our mind-blowing series, What If Deku had Beast Mode? This one's packed with action and surprises, so you don't want to miss it. Huge shout out to the awesome author, Huginus, for creating this amazing story. Let's jump right in. 8 events. 20 competitors. First place sent a message to those around them that they were here at UA for a reason, that their quirks had the capabilities that pros look for in potential hero candidates. Last place. Well, according to Aizawa-sensei, that meant the end of the line at UA and a one-way ticket home. Izuku wasn't particularly worried. He never really liked bragging about his skills or anything like that. He much preferred to fly under the radar and go about his business without bringing too much attention to himself. But that didn't mean he knew what he was capable of, and he was definitely confident in his chances to do fairly well in the assessment. Okay, first we have the 50-meter dash. First 2 students step up to the starting line. Izuku wondered if Aizawa always sounded this dead. When was the last time he got a good night's sleep? Somehow he found it hard to believe that Aizawa-sensei would be very much of a motivating type of teacher. Ajiri, the frog-looking girl, and Ida stepped up to the starting line, preparing for the signal to go. As soon as the starting horn sounded, Ida pushed off his front foot and zoomed down the track, leaving a trail of dust in his wake. He skidded to a stop and turned to see his time. 3.04 seconds. As I thought. 50 meters is not quite a long enough distance for me to shift into third gear. Izuku looked closely and saw several metallic-looking cylinders sticking out of the back of Ida's calves, slightly smoking from the bespectacled student's run. So his quirk is some sort of motor in his calves that power his legs. So he's a speed-based hero. You must be shitting yourself with all these fucking quirks to mutter your egghead off about, nerd. Izuku turned to Katsuki, who was stood beside him staring at Ajiri, who had froggy hopped down the track, earning her a decent time of 5.58 seconds. Both of their quirks revolve around their legs. Ida-kun's quirk definitely does. But I took plenty of notes on Ajiri-san's quirk based on what she told me yesterday. She has many other frog-like qualities besides her appearance, mannerisms, and leg strength. As an animal user myself, I was really interested to get some insights from her. In fact, Katsuki felt a vein forming on his forehead, and he smacked Izuku upside the head. Will you shut up? Are you gonna do that every fucking time anyone brings up anything that has to do with anyone's quirk? Rubbing the sore spot on his head, Izuku smiled apologetically. Sorry, I'll hold it in. Next 2. We don't have all day, you know. Sato and Yaoyorozu were up next to run, and as they made their way to their starting position, Izuku found himself staring at the dark-haired girl in curiosity. From what she told me yesterday, she can create any non-living material as long as she knows its molecular structure. I wonder what she's going to make for this particular test, because the possibilities are endless. As the two lined up to run, Momo reached into her shirt, and a faint glow appeared on the exposed part of her body. She pulled her hand out, and was now holding what looked to be some sort of grappling hook gun. As soon as the signal went off, Sato bounded down the track as fast as his burly form could allow him, clearly not built for speed or agility with his muscled physique. Next to him, Momo fired the grappling gun, the hook looping around a tree branch ahead of the finish line. She clicked the trigger on the gun once more, causing the rope to retract and yanked her forward across the finish line at breakneck speed. Yaoyorozu, 3.66 seconds. Sato, 7.14 seconds. Most of the class was in awe of Momo's quirk in action, but the girl kept a game face on, seemingly not wanting to be distracted from getting the best results. A grappling gun, huh? How creative! I never would have even thought of something like that. I would have probably tried to make some sort of transportation like rollerblades or something. And based on how her quirk works, she is much more efficient in her energy consumption than many would be. That's really impressive. At this point, most of the class had noticed and begun listening to Izuku's incessant rambling. I think Midoriya is broken again like yesterday, Kaminari said with a weak chuckle. Deku-kun always gets like this when it comes to quirks. You should have seen him when we first met. Ochako laughed. It took Bakugo-kun threatening to blow his action figures up for him to stop. Uraraka-san! Izuku whined, gaining several bouts of laughter from his classmates. Well, it looks like I'm up, Ochako said as she and Ojiro stepped up to the starting line. After watching an impressive display of Ojiro's tail-powered propulsion forwards and Ochako's interesting strategy of lifting the weight off of her clothes, somehow not taking into account the odd drag that would affect her running, it came to Izuku and Katsuki's turn to run. Try not to eat too much dust getting blazed by me, nerd. Katsuki jabbed as he bent down at the starting line. I'll try my best, Kaken, Izuku replied. Alright, 50 meters isn't far enough to hit top speed, but it should be fine. Kaken is gonna be suspicious as hell if I use OFA on top of Onimorph, but I'm supposed to be here to be the best hero I can be. Can I really call myself worthy if I don't give it my all like everyone else? From behind the school building, All Might peered around the corner at the quirk assessment test in progress, staring intently at his ward. He watched the varying emotions washing over Izuku's face as he prepared to take his sprint, and immediately knew what he was thinking. The weight of a hero's decision, no matter how seemingly small, can become incredibly cumbersome depending on the consequences. Young Midoriya, we have agreed for you not speak of one for all, but when and how you decide to use it is entirely within your discretion. You must deal with the power you possess responsibly, and use it to the best of your ability to be a hero, no matter what anyone around you thinks about it. Watching the look of fierce determination spring onto Izuku's face, the skeletal man couldn't help but smile. I see. I respect your decision, my boy. Back on the field, Izuku cracked his neck and crouched down next to Katsuki. He couldn't help but slightly smirk before he activated OFA, causing green sparks to shoot off of his person, before he transformed into a dark green cheetah, bent down low to the ground waiting to start his run. Whoa, so that's Midoriya's quirk, huh? Transformation quirks aren't all that common. Glad to know I'm not alone, Kirishima said, pumping his fist in the air. So he can transform into a cheetah. A versatile quirk, indeed, Tokoyami added. Actually, I saw him transform into a panther, an elephant, and a gorilla in the entrance exam. It seems as though Midoriya-kun can transform into many different animals. Ida pushed his glasses up, not to mention that incredible strength he possesses. Are you both ready? Receiving nods from both boys, Aizawa readied his timer. The moment the siren went off, Bakugo led a series of explosions from his backwards-facing palms, propelling him down the track. Blast Rush Turbo! Eat shit, nerd! Huh! Katsuki saw a glowing green blur zoom by him out of the corner of his eye. Everyone's jaw dropped when they saw Izuku slide to a stop and transform back to human form at the end of the track. Bakugo finished moments later, eyes still wide in disbelief at Izuku's insane display of speed. Bakugo, 4.01 seconds. Midoriya. Aizawa slowly turned the phone screen to the rest of the class with a bewildered expression. 1.33 seconds. What? Was the collective scream from the rest of Class 1A. Midoriya ran 50 meters in less than 2 seconds. Not even real cheetahs can run that fast. He was going like 135 kilometers per hour. About 84 or so mph. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. Hee, I had the same problem that Ida-kun did. 50 meters isn't a lot of distance to be able to fully accelerate. You're saying that wasn't the fastest you can go? Hagakure yelled, waving her arms frantically. Look at the ground! Everyone looked to where Mineta was pointing to see deep divots in the dirt where Izuku stepped during his sprint. He broke the track. Why, these guys are too scary! The poor purple-headed boy shrieked, clutching himself in fear. At least Yayorozu looked hot doing her crazy run, completely ignoring Mineta's last remark, except for Aizawa, who gave the small boy a glare that made his bladder screech. The entirety of Class 1A turned their attention to the student that had almost quite literally blown them away with his show of athleticism. Deku! A chill ran down everyone's spine as Katsuki stalked towards Izuku with a demonic aura surrounding him. What the hell was that? A few beads of sweat rolled down the greenette's face. Izuku gulped the lump forming in his throat. That was my quirk, Kaken. He felt bad for hiding things from his best friend, but he promised All Might to keep OFA as secret as possible. And he technically wasn't lying, it was his quirk. You know that's not what I meant. Katsuki narrowed his eyes at Izuku and was about to get up in his face, but a series of bandages suddenly wrapped around his wrists and torso. That's enough, you two. Wasting time on useless conversation is highly irrational. He eyed the explosive teen. You'd do well to keep yourself in control, Bakugo. Considering trying to resist for a moment, Katsuki scoffed and let his arms go limp so that Aizawa would take the restraints off of him. Whatever. He crossed his arms and turned on his heel to go back to where the rest of the class was standing. We're talking about this later. Izuku pursed his lips nervously as Katsuki walked off, not even paying an inkling of attention to the praise and words of awe from his other classmates. That look Kaken had in his eyes, what was that? Midoriya! He was shaken by his sensei gruffly calling out to him. Hurry up and get a move on. Like I said, we don't have all day. Oh, sorry, Izuku said before running after the rest of the class to the next event. As the rest of the events went on, the gap in results among the students became more and more apparent. For almost every single event, Izuku or Momo were in first with the other narrowly behind, while Katsuki and Shoto rode near the top the entire day as well. There were of course the rare wildcard scores, such a Mineta using his purple balls to bounce back and forth 290 times in the repeated side steps, or Shoji using his many arms to achieve 540 kilograms of force on the grip strength test. Finally, it came to the final event of the day, the ball throw. Katsuki was exempt from this test, considering that he had already done it in the demonstration at the beginning, so he was resigned to fuming off to the side at the fact that he hadn't come in first or second in a single event. He wasn't sure what he was more mad about: the fact that he wasn't doing as well as he wanted to, the fact that Deku was definitely hiding something, or the fact that both of them were losing half the time to the ponytail bitch with the stripper titties. Katsuki wasn't the only one that wasn't in the cheeriest of states either. Shoto's icy glare found its way to Izuku's and Momo's backs on several occasions throughout the day, definitely upset that he wasn't standing at the top of the leaderboards. He found solace in the fact, however, that when it came to actual hero work and combat, he was confident that he had no equals in the class. Izuku tapped his chin thoughtfully as the rest of the students went up to the ball throw one by one. I have come in first in 3 of the events so far, and Yaoyorozu-san has come in first in 2 of the events so far, so my lead is safe as long as she doesn't come in first in the ball throw. More importantly, the last place spot is a toss-up between Mineta-kun and Hagakure-san. Neither of them have quirks that will help them in this last event, so there's really no telling who will come in last. His muttering was halted when he heard several amazed yells from his classmates. Whoa! The ball disappeared into the sky like it was about to say, "We're blasting off again. When the hell is it gonna land?" Bupaizawa turned the screen to his students, showing an infinity symbol. Never, apparently. Infinity? How did she get infinity? Nice one, Uraraka! No one can top that score! Ochako scratched the back of her head and chuckled sheepishly. Hee, thanks, first place! Izuku threw his fist in the air, but quickly realized his outburst and coughed into his hand. Good job, Uraraka-san, he said to his brown-haired friend. Midoriya, you're next. Just because you secured first place today doesn't mean you can slack off on this attempt. Aizawa's eyes glowed dangerously as his hair floated around him. If I think you are giving anything less than your all, there will be severe consequences. Izuku shivered slightly and nodded. Hi, sensei, he replied before stepping into the circle for his throw. Staring at the ball for a few moments, Izuku mulled over how he was going to go about his throw. Any day now, Midoriya. Nodding to himself, Izuku shocked the entirety of the class by lobbing his ball straight up into the air and turning his back to the direction he was supposed to be throwing. What is Midoriya doing? Kaminari asked as his eyes followed the ball high into the air. TCH, just shut up and watch, Blondie. Deku wouldn't do dumb shit like that for no reason. Katsuki crossed his arms and watched with the rest of the class to see Izuku's throw. Izuku rolled his shoulders casually, and suddenly gave a smirk to the rest of his class, surprising them slightly. As the ball made its way down, Izuku transformed into a green and black zebra and compressed his hind legs into his body like a glorified spring. I see, Ida said, slamming a fist into his open palm. Zebras have some of the most powerful strikes in the entire animal kingdom. An innovative approach to this test, to be sure, considering the sheer number of options that Midoriya-kun has at his disposal. Are zebras really that strong? Ashido pondered. Aren't they just sort of like mini horses? Not quite, Ashido-san. Momo butted in. It is a common misconception that zebras are simply defenseless animals of prey that live in fear of predators like lions or crocodiles. If provoked, it is entirely feasible that a full-grown zebra could defend itself from more than one lion at a time. There have even been recorded cases of zebras decapitating lions with their powerful kicks. Everyone's eyes widened at that. And you fuckers already saw from the other events that Deku's animal forms are more powerful than the animals are naturally. Look for yourselves if you don't believe me. Bakugo pointed a finger at the green net in the throwing circle. Zebrazuka began crackling with the familiar green sparks that everyone had come to see multiple times throughout the day. I inherited one for all proudly, and I have the responsibility to use it as a part of who I am. And who I am is someone who always gives his all. The ball dropped right at level with his hind legs, and with precise timing, Izuku fired his hind legs out, smashing into the ball with a resounding crack. The poor sphere was rocketed out of sight, the only evidence of its existence being the trails of smoke following its path, and the shrill whistling of it hurtling through the air. Dropping her arm that was put up to protect her eyes from the wind that picked up due to Izuku's kick, Ochako looked on in amazement at her friend's incredible feat. Way to go, Deku-kun! You crushed it! Several of her classmates could only nod dumbly at Ochako's fairly apt description of what had just occurred. The pregnant pause that befell everyone was finally lifted after the distance recorder finally pinged to notify that the ball had landed. 1,734.2 meters. After the number of times it had happened over the course of the day, regarding Midoriya in particular, One would think that most of the class would be desensitized and not yell in shock at whatever result the green-haired teen got, but alas, today would not be the case. Izuku could swear that his ears would be permanently damaged by the end of the day. Jiro-san must be in hell if I'm complaining. 1,700 meters. Kaminari, Siro and Mineta all muttered with terrified smiles on their faces, holding themselves and rocking back and forth. Ahem, well that concludes the quirk assessment test. Here are the results. Aizawa pressed a few buttons on his phone in rapid succession, resulting in a large projection to appear with the rankings on the test. These are the overall rankings that tallied up your total scores based on where you placed in each event. Midoriya Izuku, Yaoyorozu Momo, Todoroki Shoto, Bakugo Katsuki, Ida Tenya, 20, Hagakure Toru. Several students sighed in relief when they saw that their name was not at the bottom of the rankings, but no one could help but feel bad for the floating gym uniform trembling with tears before them. Hagakure Toru. Aizawa turned to the girl, who was sniffling profusely. You ranked last overall. I'm sure that you recall at the beginning I said what would happen to whomever came in last place in today's test, yes? He received what looked like a nod. The only real indicator he got was the slight bend in the collar of the floating top. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Toru wiped a few falling tears from her face. Well, I'm sad that I couldn't do better. Asterisk sniff asterisk my quirk didn't really help me in any of the events, but I really tried my hardest. So, at least I can leave knowing in my heart that I did everything I could today. Everyone was visibly impressed by Toru's maturity, which contrasted greatly to her cutesy personality, and couldn't help but smile at the girl's resolve. Aizawa crossed his arms over his chest. I see. Well then I suppose that's that. Now please pick up the syllabi over there before you go. I will see you all 20 of you first thing tomorrow. Dismissed. Everyone stood shocked as Aizawa slowly trudged away with his hands dug into his pockets. The scruffy man paused in places and turned to his class. Oh, by the way, I was lying about expelling whoever came in last place today. I just said that so everyone would try their hardest. Ignoring the gasps and cries of dismay, Aizawa scratched his messy mop of hair and yawned. I find it highly irrational to expel someone if they have no control over if their quirk provides them with specific physical enhancements that will help them succeed. I can tell that you, Hagakure, made the most of what you were given today. As far as I am concerned, that shows you have potential. Don't get comfortable though. You could have trained your body more so that your base athleticism was at a much higher level. Never settle, never waver. That is what UA's motto of Plus Ultra embodies. Good day. With that, Aizawa walked off. Hagakure's knees finally gave way, and she collapsed onto the floor clutching her chest. I can't believe it! Several students came to comfort her and congratulate her for being able to stay at UA, causing Momo to sigh wearily. I had a feeling that Aizawa-sensei was deceiving us when he said he would expel someone today. It was fairly obvious if you all think about it. Why would UA waste time and resources to move us into their dorm facilities and such if there was a possibility that we would be dismissed as soon as school started? I'm surprised the rest of you didn't figure it out for yourselves. I suppose I should have said something. She sweat dropped at the looks of dismay washing over her classmates' faces. I wouldn't be so sure, Yaoyorozu-san. Izuku got the attention of the dark-haired teen along with the rest of the class. Remember when sensei said every teacher has absolute free reign over their classes? I feel like he could have easily dismissed anyone that he saw was not worth teaching. Izuku recalled an offhand conversation he had with Midnight during a break in his training, but made sure not to mention where he heard it from. I heard a rumor that last year Aizawa expelled his entire first-year class because he deemed them as hopeless on the first day. Momo gasped and held a hand to her mouth. I see. Well, I will keep your words in mind, thank you. Izuku gave her a thumbs up as everyone grabbed their syllabi and began making their way to the locker rooms. Midoriya Izuku, he blew everyone out of the water today, myself included. He seems like quite the formidable one, to be sure. Aizawa-kun! Wait up a moment! Aizawa stopped in his tracks and his shoulders drooped slightly. He let out a long sigh and lazily turned around. So you were watching, All Might. Any particular reason as to why? The burly man shrugged his shoulders. Is it too hard to believe that I wanted to get a good look as to how capable our students are? I am new to this teaching thing after all, so Nisa thought it would be a good idea for me to be as prepared as possible. Aizawa internally debated whether it was worth it to pick up on the very obvious fact that All Might was hiding something, if his nervous hand trembling and avoidance of eye contact was anything to go off of. Who knew the symbol of peace was such a terrible liar? Well, I don't have time to waste with standing around, you know. Ah, yes, of course. I was just curious is all about what you said to the students. I read in your file that last year you had no problems with expelling an entire class because they were not deemed any good, So what made you decide to take such a light-hearted approach today? Aizawa rolled his eyes and sighed. As rough around the edges as all of those kids are, not one of them has zero potential, that's as clear as day. If there was any indication in my mind that any of them were unworthy of being here, I would have sent them packing as soon as the opportunity presented itself. It's cruel to let a kid keep dreaming of something that will never come true, after all. From top to bottom, everyone in this class has potential to be something, but everyone in this class also still has miles to go before they can call themselves respectable. If that's it, then I have things to do. All Might stared at his colleague as he walked off, finger tapping on his chin thoughtfully. Despite the way you carry yourself, you show kindness in your own odd way, Aizawa. Here's hoping he stops giving the students near heart attacks at least. The first official day of class at UA did not go exactly as Class 1A thought it would. For a world-renowned institute that pushed out notorious heroes like All Might and Endeavor, most thought it would be a whole lot less, well, boring. Coming in with the expectation of cool stuff like large-scale combat training or rescue scenarios, but instead coming face-to-face with algebraic expressions and sonnet writing, it was hard to not feel a little underwhelmed. Izuku was trying his best to pay attention as Cementos introduced his first lesson in The Catcher in the Rye, but his mind wandered all over the place. In his defense, a lot had happened yesterday. Flashback. Deku, tell me how you got so strong. Immediately after everyone had changed and gone back to the dorms, Katsuki had cornered Izuku and wasted no time in picking up on their conversation that was stopped by Aizawa earlier. Katsuki's face was inches away from Izuku's as the former held the latter firmly by the collar of his shirt, burning red eyes piercing into deep green. Kaken, I told you, didn't I? That personal hell training I went through on my own, it was for me to grow and get stronger as an individual. Why are you getting so mad at me? Katsuki grit his teeth and felt his knuckles going numb from gripping onto Izuku's shirt so hard. What the hell kinda training did you do in 10 fucking months to do so much better than me, huh? You did better than me on the entrance exam, didn't you? This caused Katsuki to loosen his grip slightly. I'm not gonna sit around and just live in your shadow, Kaken. There's people out there better than you at some things, just like there's things you're good at. What happened to all that talk growing up that we were partners? You expect me to be able to face you if I can't stand on my own 2 legs first, Kaken? I want to tell you everything I do. But I can't yet. The fuck do you mean you can't? Izuku clenched his fists together, and his eyes screwed tightly. I made a promise. Hiding things from Katsuki was a lot harder than Izuku thought it would be. You made a promise. Katsuki released Izuku and turned around. You don't want to tell me yet? Fine. Fuck you too. Keep your shitty secrets, but don't think this is over. I'm gonna show you, that ponytail bitch, that Neapolitan ice cream looking fuck, and anyone else who wants a piece of me. I'm just getting started, you hear me? Flashback end. Kaken has been uncharacteristically calm since yesterday. He hasn't yelled at anyone today or anything. Izuku couldn't help but stare at his best friend's back right in front of him before a piece of chalk impacted him square in the forehead. Is there a particular reason you seem to be spacing out, Midoriya? Cementos called across the room. You know, sensei. Sorry. Izuku bowed his head with a blush, earning a few giggles from his classmates around him. Just make sure it doesn't happen again. Anyways, I may as well end my lesson there. Please make sure to read up to Chapter 3 for next class. Good day. As everyone packed their things and prepared for next period, Zero leaned over to Midoriya's desk. Hey man, you alright? You looked even more spaced out than yesterday, except you weren't muttering this time? Oh, he was. Jiro interjected, earlobe jacks hovering behind her head. He was just doing it really quietly. I could barely hear him. Izuku blushed and scratched the back of his head. Hee, whoops. My bad. And I'm fine, Zero-kun, no need to worry. Just wondering what's gonna happen today, is all. Yeah, I'm kinda worried. I mean, yesterday wasn't even technically the first day, and someone almost got expelled. Mineta leaned over his desk, nodding his head vigorously. Yeah. I was so scared that I was gonna get kicked out of here. Aizawa is a psycho. Getting back to putting his books away, Izuku's ears picked up on something that sounded like rapid tapping against the floor, and it was getting louder. You hear it too, Midoriya? Jiro said to the boy, leaning back in her chair so she could look at him. He nodded to her, and they both looked towards the door. At this point, everyone had stopped talking and were wondering what the sound was. The back door of the classroom suddenly burst open, revealing All Might hanging from the doorframe in his red and white Silver Age costume. Here ready to greet you like a hero. Huh, he came through the wrong door. Everyone deadpanned, but they quickly grew excited to see the number 1 hero in their class. All Might proudly strode into the room amongst the murmurs of amazement until he reached the podium at the front of the class. Welcome, young students, to UA High's most important class, Hero Basic Training. In this class, you will learn the basics of what it takes to be a pro and what it means to fight in the name of justice and peace. Today's lesson, battle training. The class erupted in cheers of excitement at getting to let loose and fight training, but Izuku was slightly worried at how collected Katsuki seemed to be. Catch, you better be ready, nerd. Today I'm gonna show everyone just what I'm capable of, Katsuki said, not even turning around to look at Izuku. Before Izuku could say anything else, All Might hit a switch and several panels opened up from the wall. And all great heroes know that you gotta look good. Get yourselves suited up and meet me at Training Ground Beta. Everyone ready? Yes, sir. They say that clothes make the pros. And you're all looking great. All Might shouted, giving his students a thumbs up. As the seasoned veteran eyed his students in their newly minted costumes, he felt excitement welling up within him. This is getting me all amped up, students. You look so lit. Oh no, All Might. Please no. Kaminari groaned with his head in his hands. What? President Mike gave me pointers on how to be young and hip. I am a teacher who is with it, as you kids say. The collective groan was ignored by the in-denial adult as he noticed that a certain greenette was missing from the lineup. Where is young Midoriya? Sorry for keeping you waiting, everyone. The class turned to the tunnel to see Izuku jogging up to them with a wave. I was making sure everything fit properly and didn't restrict my mobility. Izuku wore a skin-tight dark green bodysuit with black trim, and a large design of blood gashes on his chest resembling claw marks. He accessorized with a silver belt, black gloves, and his signature red boots on his feet. On his neck was a respirator with tiger-like fangs on it, which Izuku locked onto his face with a click. Wow, Deku-kun! You look really cool, Ochako said. I guess I'm not the only one who ended up with a skin-tight suit, huh? Your muscles are totally showing. She chuckled, pointing to both of their costumes that left little to the imagination. I love this school. Hagakure and Mineta both muttered, completely ignored by the rest of their class. Now that everyone is here and ready, we can begin our combat training. Now your entrance exam took place in a large area in a free-for-all type format, but realistically, most of the fiends you will apprehend will be indoors. So today, you'll be split into pairs of heroes and villains to fight 2-on-2 battles indoors. The name of the game? Hostage Scenario. Isn't this a little too advanced for our first lesson, Karo? Ajri pondered. Nonsense! The best kind of knowledge is gained on the battlefield. Now, what will be the criteria for victory? How are we going to be paired up? Based on skill? Compatibility? How badly can I beat the shit out of the other people? Isn't my cape just the most fabulous thing you've ever laid your eyes on? Can I go to the bathroom, please? Hold on to your questions until I've finished explaining. All Might whined. Listen up! The two villains will keep the hostage somewhere in their hideout, and it is up to the heroes to foil their plans by rescuing the hostage and bringing them to safety. Heroes and villains are eliminated by being captured with this special binding tape. The heroes win once they bring the hostage safely out of the building, but lose if they are captured, run out of time, or jeopardize the safety of the hostage in any way. Understand? Wow, the heroes have a huge disadvantage here. They only have one way to win and have a lot more to worry about. That's almost always the case, young Ishido. As heroes, we must face plenty of adversity and find a way to persevere with our heads held high. Now, let's draw lots to see what the teams will be. Team A, Kaminari and Sato, heroes, vs Team B, Hagakure and Ojiro, villains. Team C, Midoriya and Jiro, heroes, vs Team H, Jayorozu and Kirishima, villains. Team D, Todoroki and Shoji, heroes, vs Team E, Tokoemi and Koda, villains. Team F, Ishido and Ajri, heroes, vs Team I, Uraraka and Aoyama, villains. Team J, Bakugo and Siro, heroes, vs Team G, Ida and Mineta, villains. Okay, now that the teams and matchups are set, here is your hostage. All Might pointed towards the tunnel, where a scantily clad woman sauntered in with a sensual smirk on her face. It's the R-rated hero, Midnight! Kaminari shouted, wearing a blush that most of the class was matching. I love this school! Mineta shouted, pumping his little fist in the air. Let's do this! Hello all! Oh, seeing you in your hero costumes, in the prime of your youth. I can't help but get excited. Remember now, I am a hostage, so that means either party can jeopardize my safety, okay? Alright, Team A and Team B, you have 10 minutes to prepare. Everyone else, to the monitor room. Away, so, who do you think is gonna win, Deku-kun? Izuku's eyes were glued to the screen as he took in his friend's question, mind running rampant with analyses. I probably have to say Hagakure-san and Ojiro-kun have the advantage. Sato and Kaminari are not particularly built for infiltration, and Kaminari doesn't have enough control over his quirk that he could guarantee that he wouldn't shock Sato or the hostage. Plus, with Hagakure-san's invisibility, the villain team definitely has the element of surprise on their side. Yayarosa nodded her head in agreement. I agree with Midoriya-san. In close quarters, there is no doubt that the villain team has the advantage, and adding that to the advantage they have with it being their territory, yes, it does not look to be the most promising situation for the hero team. But let us cheer both sides on to the best we can, Ida declared, waving his arm up and down stiffly. Well said, my students. Now, hero team, are you ready? All Might said into his headset. We were born ready, All Might. Villain team, are you ready? Yup. We're ready to go. All right, remember, hero team, you have 10 minutes to secure the hostage and bring them to safety. Your time starts now. All right, Sato, my man, let's do this. Kaminari burst through the front door of the building with a yell. We know you're here, villains. Give up now and we'll bring the pain a little less. Sato pounded his fists together and began knocking down doors as they ran, gradually making their way up the building. Reaching the 3rd floor, they paused to rest for a moment before moving forwards again. They probably kept the hostage on the top floor, so it would be hardest for us to save them. So let's keep moving and get up there. Right, Kaminari said before the two boys broke into a run up the stairs. So I guess they decided on the in-your-face approach, huh? Ojiro scratched his cheek as he heard the loud noises of Kaminari and Sato entering the building. He and Toru had decided to hole up in the large storage room on the top floor, keeping Midnight behind a stack of wooden pallets on the opposite wall of the only door into the room. So what do you want to do, Ojiro-kun? Should we stick to the plan of me sneaking around and trying to capture one of them? Well, if they're just running around trying to find us, it might be a little difficult for you to catch either of them. And if you get found out, it will be pretty hard for you to get away. And they might see your shoes and gloves too. Oh, I am gonna take them off too. I have to be completely naked for my quirk to be used at full effect, Hagakure nonchalantly said as she stripped of her remaining clothing, causing Ojiro to turn around with a sweat drop. There's something strangely unsettling about that. Way to go, Hagakure-san. I love your style. I'm all for solidarity, but as you can see, I'm a bit incapacitated at the moment. But I'm naked in spirit, Midnight said from her spot in the corner where she was tied up. There's something very unsettling about that. This is the last door. Let's do this, Sato. Footsteps were heard on the other side of the closed door, causing Ojiro to leap to his feet. Welp, looks like we have no choice but to stand and fight. Hagakure, stand on the other side of the door and capture Sato as soon as he comes in. I'll cover the hostage. Right. Hagakure replied as she got into position, capture tape at the ready. Not moments later, the door slammed open and smashed against the wall, Sato and Kaminari bounding into the room. Get ready, villains! We're here to spoil your day. Sato, let's get him, Sato? Kaminari turned to see white tape wrapped around Sato's arm, and the large teen standing there with an apologetic expression on his face. Next to him was a single glove holding up the victory sign. Sato of Team Hero has been captured, boomed All Might's voice over the intercom. Oh man, well then I guess I'll have to save the day. Kaminari turned just in time for Ojiro to sweep his legs out from under him and pin his waist down with his body weight. Ojiro wasted no time in wrapping the capture tape around Kaminari's wrist, ending the match. Kaminari of Team Hero has been captured. Since both members of the hero team have been captured, the villain team wins. Heh, sorry Kaminari, better luck next time I guess, Ojiro said as he got off of his classmate and helped him to his feet. You sure got us good. Kaminari patted the dust off his behind and wrapped an arm around Ojiro's shoulder. That leg sweep was so Cobra Kai Dojo, man, we did it, Ojiro-kun. Ojiro turned to see a pair of gloves excitedly waving in front of him. We totally kicked butt. Kaminari looked on with a sweat drop and leaned over to Sato, who had just caught up to them as they headed back to the monitor room for the results. Dude, is it just me, or is she like naked? Sato nodded. Yeah, it kinda startled me too. I guess it's not that big of a deal since we can't see her. Hey, is it just me, or do you feel like we're forgetting something? Kaminari tilted his head to the side in thought, yellow bangs sliding across his forehead. Now that you mention it, hey you brats! Come untie me. All four students stopped dead in their tracks. After successfully keeping Midnight from incurring her wrath on the four students who had just conducted their battle trial, All Might had finished writing his report on the first match and turned to his class. All right, everyone. Now that the first match is complete, I want to hear what you all thought of it. Who was the MVP of this match? Momo's hand shot up immediately, and once All Might called on her, she cleared her throat and spoke confidently before her peers. Well, it was clear from the get-go that the villain team had the advantage in this bout. Despite being rushed in the room that they were stationed in, they quickly apprehended both heroes and used the hastiness of their opponents against them. Both villains did well to do their part in taking the hero team down, but I believe that Hagakure-san was the most valuable. She used her quirk to full effect in catching Sato-san off guard and capturing him as soon as he entered the room. Ha ha, well said, young Yaoyorozu. Very informative indeed, I could not have said it better myself. All Might turned away and coughed nervously into his hand. Holy shit. She said so much. I thought young Midoriya was bad. Looks like he has a rival when it comes to overcomplicated and over-detailed explanations to things. He cleared his throat and flipped the page over on his clipboard. Well, anyways, wait, All Might-sensei! Izuku called out with his hand up, getting his teacher's attention. I think there are some things that may have been overlooked by Yaoyorozu-san regarding the last match. Oh. Well, sure, go ahead. Izuku turned to his classmates. I think most of you aren't giving enough credit to Kaminari-kun and Sato-kun. He turned to the blonde. It was your idea to rush in head first and start searching up and down for the hostage, right? Getting a nod, he continued. You did that on purpose, taking Hagakure-san's quirk into consideration, right? Huh, what do you mean? Asked Ishido. How would that help? Think about it. No offense, but Hagakure-san isn't the most athletic person, so in order for her to capture either of the heroes, she would have had to rely solely on the element of surprise. If Kaminari-kun and Sato-kun slowly made their way around and constantly paused, there would be plenty of chance for her to sneak up and catch one of them off guard. Also, blitzing into the room and at Ojiro-kun was really their best plan of attack, since he was the only one that would have been able to defend well in a hand-to-hand scenario. Kaminari-kun also had no option to use his quirks, since he could risk hurting Sato-kun or the hostage, as stated earlier, so all he could do was work best with the situation that was presented to him. If Hagakure-san had failed to capture Sato-kun right away, I think that the fight could have easily gone in their favor. Most of the class began nodding in agreement, causing Momo to frown to herself. That never even occurred to me. How is it that 2 times in a row, Midoriya-san keeps beating me? Physical tests are one thing, but I thought I would at least have the advantage in bouts of logic and analysis. Midoriya! Kaminari bounded towards the greenette and threw his arms around him with tears comically pouring from his eyes. You didn't think I was a pathetic loser like everyone else? While Izuku patted the crying teen's back and tried to pry him off of his body, bouts of chatter began to arise from the rest of the class. Man, I thought the heroes really blew that one big time. But Midoriya raises some good points, Siro said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Indeed. The hero team did well, all things considered. Tokoyami looked at Kaminari blubbering into Midoriya's shoulder pitifully. Despair has its own calms. It looks like Yaoyorozu-chan has competition, Karo. Ajiri stated, getting nods from Uraraka and Jiro. Deku-kun is a real smarty pants. I wouldn't be surprised if he was at the top of the class this year. Or one of them at least. Bakugo-kun is pretty smart too. Fuck you, round face. DKU doesn't have shit on me. Jiro rolled her eyes. He sure doesn't act like it. So loud. Anyway, it's our turn next, so we should go get ready. Midoriya, said Boy turned at the mention of his name, finally able to be free of Kaminari after Ojiro and Sato had pulled him off. Oh right, good call. Can we go prep, All Might? Huh? Oh sure. Remember, once you get down there, both teams have 10 minutes to prepare. I'll call the start over the intercom once it's time. All right. Izuku turned to leave with Jiro, but caught himself and whipped around. Good luck, Kirishima-kun. Yaoyorozu-san. I hope we have a good match. Hell yeah. I'm bringing my A-game. Kirishima excitedly replied before turning to his partner. Let's do this, Yaoyorozu, said girl looked lost in thought for a moment before she was shaken out of it. Oh, of course. I'll do my best as well, Kirishima-san. Momo replied before exiting the room towards the trial building. Okay, hero team, villain team, your 10-minute prep begins now. Okay, that's the last of them. Man, your quirk sure is handy, being able to make thick metal sheets like these. Kirishima wiped some beads of sweat forming on his brow as he and Momo finished barricading all of the windows to the room that they were keeping their hostage. Now what should we do? Just wait till they come? Momo pulled the top of her leotard closed and twirled a metal bow staff in her hand. Jiro-san's quirk will allow them to pinpoint our location almost immediately, and Midoriya-san's quirk gives them an advantage if we try to stay on the move, so I think that staying here and shoring up our defenses is the best approach to this situation. I want to save some of my reserves for an emergency, so I don't think I can make anything else too big either. Taking a moment to brainstorm for a moment, Momo surveyed her surroundings, hoping to find a spark of inspiration that would give her team an edge in this battle. Okay. So since the only possible way of entry is the door on the opposite wall of where we are keeping the hostage, we can funnel them through there, and if they do manage to somehow get through us, it's a straight shot to Midnight Sensei, unless... Momo clapped her hands as the gears turned in her heads. Yes, that could work. She wasted no time in activating her quirk and creating the objects necessary for her plan. Kirishima-san, your quirk allows you to make your skin extremely hard, correct? Pretty much. The redhead activated his quirk in his arm, causing it to become jagged and sharp. I can break through stuff as strong as concrete, and can keep the form up pretty long as I'm not getting hit too hard. Why? The black-haired teen gave her partner a fierce look that exuded nothing but determination. Could you successfully curl up into a ball in that state? As soon as Izuku and Jiro made it to the base of the building where the hostage would be held, the greenette began going through a series of stretches to limber himself up for the upcoming bout. Leaning against the railing, Jiro looked up at the building, twirling one of her jacks in her finger. So what's the plan, Midoriya? Izuku stood back up straight from touching his toes and began stretching his arm across his chest. Knowing Yaoyorozu-san, she'll know that there's no point in hiding or staying on the move because of our quirks, so it's most likely that we are gonna have to power into whatever room they're holed up in and it'll be a head-on fight. Jiro raised an eyebrow. So we are just gonna let them funnel us into whatever traps they have set up. Look dude, you're obviously strong as shit, but are you sure we can manage something like that? I don't know how good I'll be in an actual fight. Izuku gave his partner an amused grin. The key to beating someone as smart as Yaoyorozu is to make her think she's the one in control. He poked his index finger against his temple several times. We'll give her exactly what she wants, but who says her traps will be able to stop us? We can go up floor by floor, you using your quirk to listen in for where they are, and I can use the air vents to get around faster. Once either of us finds them, we regroup outside their room and get ready to breach from there. No doubt they have some kind of barricades or reinforcements on the entrances to slow us down, but I have a solution to that. Izuku smirked at his clenched fist, the glow of OFA hidden by his gloves. Looking at the slightly unsure look on Jiro's face, the boy patted her on the shoulder and gave her his most all-might wise smile he could muster. And you should believe in yourself a little more than that, Jiro-san. You're here for a reason, just like the rest of us, so show us why, okay? The moment you stop doubting yourself is the moment you really start to shine, trust me. Jiro stared into Izuku's eyes for a few seconds before guffawing into her hand. Dude, that was so lame. She stuck out her fist. But thanks. Let's do this. Izuku's smile widened and he bumped fists with his teammate, energized by her newfound resolve. Let's do this. The intercom bonged in their headsets. Alright, prep time is over. Your time starts. Now, Midoriya, come in. Jiro pulled her earphone jack out of the wall and crouched down, finger to her headset in her ear. I hear some shuffling up on the top floor, northeast corner. That's gotta be them. I'm gonna head up and get a better listen, so meet me a floor below that on the southwest staircase. Izuku scurried through the air vent and swiftly transformed back to human from his mouse form and answered the call. Got it, I'll be right there. Bounding up the stairs, Izuku slowed to a sneaking walk as he came up to Jiro, who was kneeling down with her jack plugged into the wall. Yeah, they're definitely up there, she whispered, nodding in acknowledgement. Izuku signaled for Jiro to follow him, and the two slowly creeped up the stairs. They came to a stop just outside of the door to the room that the villain team were heard to be in. Izuku held up a fist to Jiro behind him, before he put up 3 fingers. The punk girl nodded to him, and he began counting down. 3, 2, 1. Izuku instantly morphed into a bighorn sheep and galloped forward with all his strength, boosting the power of his rush with OFA coursing through him. The metal door flew off the hinges and skidded across the tile floor, allowing for Izuku and Kyoka to rush through the opening. Izuku morphed back to normal and looked around. Something's not right. The room was cluttered with crates, barrels, and pallets, making it incredibly difficult for the hero duo to see where their opponents, or the hostage, was. There were scarce rays of light peeking in through the barricaded windows, making it difficult to see in front of them. Izuku sniffed the air a couple of times, confused as to what scent he had picked up. Is that gunpowder? The teen's eyes widened as a faint orange light glowed from across the room, traveling across the floor. Sure, was all he could get out before a resounding boom was let off through the room and Kirishima came hurtling towards Izuku, impacting the emerald-haired hero in training head-on and sending them both flying backwards into the hall. Midoriya! Jiro could barely make heads or tails of where she was, still reeling from the sound of the cannon afflicting her hypersensitive hearing. Thankfully, she regained her bearings just in time to dodge a downward swing of Momo's bow staff, causing the girl to leap backwards out of harm's way. Momo looked hesitant for a second before she dramatically pointed at Jiro with her other hand on her hip. Surrender now, hero, or I will have to capture you by force. You will never stop our nefarious schemes. Momo internally winced due to the fact that she had never had to act like a villain before and wasn't sure exactly how evil she was sounding. Suppressing a giggle, Jiro shrugged and put her hands up. Alright, you got me. As Momo approached her, Jiro sneakily slid one of her jacks down the back of her leg to plug into the port she had built into her boot. Right as the taller girl reached out with the tape, Jiro let off a sound blast powerful enough to send Momo to her knees. Seizing the opportunity, Kyoka struck her opponent backwards with a thrusting kick before she grabbed the bow's staff off of the floor and dashed out of sight. Grimacing from the blow, Momo slowly rose to her feet and frantically looked around. I can't believe I let her deceive me like that. Forming a new weapon for herself, Momo pulled a bakken, wooden sword, out of her shoulder and slowly began making her way around the room in search of Jiro. Izuku shook the dizziness out of his head from the impact of Kirishima slamming into him, pulling himself out of the pile of debris that he had created when he was plowed through a stack of wooden crates. As soon as he stood up, he had to roll out of harm's way as Kirishima came sailing down and smashed into the floor with his strike intended for Midoriya's head. Let's go, Midoriya! Me and you, a one-on-one brawl! Kirishima smiled widely as he hardened his arms and quickly advanced on the green net. Midoriya ducked under a right hook and threw a hard left towards Kirishima's sternum, followed by a right straight that managed to send the redhead skidding back. Hey, you got some power there, Midoriya! But you're gonna have to do better than that to break through me. Kirishima wasted no time in diving back in and assaulting Izuku with a flurry of strikes aimed at various spots on his upper body. Not missing a beat, Izuku continuously dodged each blow, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. There! Sidestepping an overextended swing, Izuku surged with OFA and delivered a swift series of punches to Kirishima's body and head, wincing slightly at the abrasive surface digging into his gloved knuckles. The strikes were powerful enough to rock the hardening user, leaving him susceptible to a follow-up that Izuku made sure to capitalize on. As if he were Charlie the Karate Chimp himself, Izuku went chimpanzee and spun on his heel, twisting in the air to deliver a devastating butterfly kick that connected square in Kirishima's face. The blow sent him corkscrewing through the air, and he landed hard on his back a few feet away. Izuku chased after Kirishima, grabbing him by the ankle and spinning around like a hairy green Beyblade. The student-turned-simian flung his poor opponent hard into the wall, causing him to gasp in pain upon impact and slide down onto the floor. Izuku reverted and ran up to Kirishima, quickly wrapping the capture tape around his unmoving body. Kirishima of Team Villain has been captured. Sorry, Kirishima-kun. Gotta go help Jiro-san. Izuku called over his shoulder as he ran back into the room where Momo and Kyoka were scuffling. He peeked into the room to see Momo slowly moving around the room, peering around corners every few moments. Jiro-san must have managed to escape and hide somewhere, Izuku said to himself quietly as he stalked into the room. We still haven't been able to locate where the hostage is being kept, so I guess all we can do right now is capture Yaoyorozu-san so we can search interrupted. I'm pretty sure I could win on my own, but it's a team effort, so finding Jiro-san first will help. Izuku transformed into a mouse and quickly scampered around the room, making sure to stay out of Momo's sideline. Scurrying around a stack of metal barrels, Izuku caught sight of his partner and silently transformed back to normal. Noticing his approach, Jiro peered over her hiding spot to make sure the coast was clear. I think I know where the hostage is. I can hear a heartbeat in the corner over there. Jiro stuck a thumb out towards a large tarp in the far corner of the room. I think they hid her under there, she whispered. Get down! Both teens ducked as Momo walked by, visibly irritated that she had not managed to find them yet. As soon as she passed, Izuku pulled his head up and surveyed their options. We only have a few minutes left, so if we are gonna make a move, it has to be soon. Crouching back down into hiding, Izuku turned to his teammate. Alright, here is what we are gonna do. Where in the world are they? Momo walked around the room for about the fourth time, clearly upset and out of patience. I know that we can win via timeout, but this is honestly quite vexing, especially after the fact that I wanted to show my skills against Midoriya-san. Huffing in annoyance, Momo decided to make one more round before she stopped dead in her tracks. Is that? She peered around one of the foundational pillars in the room to see Kyoka standing with her back completely turned to her, right in front of the tarp that she had hid Midnight under. Panicking slightly, Momo quickly stalked over, hoping that the earphone jack user was distracted enough for her to remain unnoticed. Just as Kyoka was about to lift the tarp, Momo pulled her bakken back, aiming for a quick incapacitating strike. Now! Kyoka swiftly ducked under the swing, causing Momo to freeze in shock. The purple-haired girl then spun on her heel and used her jacks to swipe and disarm Momo, sending her weapons sliding across the room. However, either girl expected one of Kyoka's jack to get deflected by the hilt of Momo's weapon, causing it to redirect and swing across Momo's chest, the metal tip of the jack ripping off the top of Momo's leotard. Both girls went bug-eyed and stared up and down between the endowed teen's chest and each other, both blushing harder by the second. We got you! The wealthy Yaoyorozu had no time to react as an emerald green cow galloped towards her, intent on ramming her out of commission. Izuku's eyes widened when he saw the state of Momo's dress, causing him to stumble out of control and back into human form. Ah! Izuku screamed, covering his eyes with his hands as he uncontrollably slammed into Momo, sending them both flying and landing on the ground in a tangled heap. Ow! Ow! Izuku rubbed his sore head as he opened his eyes, only to see that he had landed on his back, with Momo pressed onto him, her face hovering over his. Steam shot out of his ears as he covered his eyes. I'm sorry, Kia! Momo shrieked, reflexively socking Izuku right in the face and leaping back with her arms over her chest, only to be caught and capture taped from behind by a red-faced Jiro. I got you, now cover up! Momo wasted no time in using the tape to pull the remains of her leotard back over herself, using her quirk to quickly create a black hoodie to fully cover her form. Yaoyorozu of Team Villain has been captured. Now all the hero team has to do is save the hostage, and they win. Momo's shoulders slumped in defeat, a dark rain cloud appearing over her. I lost again. Jiro patted her back sympathetically as they both walked over to the tarp. Jiro pulled it off to reveal a large clear box with Midnight sitting inside, tied up and gagged. You really locked her up good, huh? Jiro said with a sweat drop. Why yes, well, with Midoriya's strength taken into consideration, this was all I could think of to slow him down. Bulletproof glass and a complicated series of knots using polyester rope. Just then, Izuku walked up to them, sporting a bloody nose and a blushing face. He saw Momo and immediately looked away. Blushing a bit herself, Momo bowed her head. I'm sorry, Midoriya-san. Still unable to look at her, Izuku scratched the back of his head. Don't worry about it, we were opponents after all. He smashed a lock to the box and pulled Midnight out, slinging the woman over his shoulder. Behind him, Jiro undid the gag that was around Midnight's mouth, allowing for their teacher to let out a breath. That's better. Midnight began squirming in Izuku's grip. What a wonderful job you heroes did! Shall I give my big strong hero a wonderful reward for saving me and carrying me to safety? I would be more than happy to MFPH. She was cut short by Jiro putting the gag back over her mouth. The trio of students walked out of the room to see Kirishima being carted out on a stretcher by 2 robot assistants. The redhead looked up from his lying position and gave Midoriya a thumbs up. That was a hell of a fight, Midoriya. You got me good, but I'll be waiting for a rematch. Izuku smiled and bumped fists with his classmate, waving at him as he was carried off to the infirmary. The hostage has been successfully rescued. Hero team wins. Great job, Jiro-san. You did great. Izuku smiled warmly at his partner, getting a playful punch to the shoulder in return. You didn't do half bad yourself, dude. Nice workin' with ya. Izuku blushed and side-glanced at Momo. You too, Yaoyorozu-san. It was a good match. Momo chuckled dryly. You completely overwhelmed us, Midoriya-san. We both know it. No amount of planning and preparation could make up for the clear gap in ability that we have. She finished dejectedly. Izuku turned around to face the sad girl, an intense expression on his face. Don't say that. You are an incredibly smart and capable person who will no doubt be a hero. Don't let losses drag you down, let them push you forward to be better than you were yesterday. Smiling at his words, Momo nodded and clenched her fist in front of her. That's very kind, thank you. I will take this loss to heart and continue to improve. You will not be able to get a moment's rest, Midoriya-san, because I will keep improving until we can compete on equal grounds. Both Kyoka and Izuku smiled at Momo's resolve before the boy's smile dropped. Did I just make another rival? Why does this keep happening? He shrugged to himself as they walked back to the monitor room for assessment. Oh well, just another reason to keep getting stronger. Though, Kakin will probably be upset that he has more people to deal with. It'll be fine. As soon as Izuku, Momo, and Kyoka returned to the monitor room where the rest of their class was, they were swarmed with a barrage of questions and comments about their match. The hero team was receiving praise for their efforts to achieve victory, while most congratulated Momo as well for giving her best despite losing. As soon as the excitement died down, Izuku was grabbed by Mineta and Kaminari, who both had dark looks in their eyes. Midoriya! They screamed, shaking the green net wildly. You lucky bastard! Izuku grimaced as the two slobbered all over him and yanked at his arms. How can you just walk back in here after witnessing Nirvana? How could the camera angle from in here have not shown it to me? Mineta leapt up and down on Izuku's shoulders as he clung to his head. Mineta and Kaminari were swiftly incapacitated by Jiro's quirk, and their quivering bodies were dragged away by Ida, who was shaking his head in dismay. Ahem, anyway. All Might mumbled with a sweat drop. Very well done, my students! Now, can we have some insight on the battle that we had just witnessed? Anyone? Anyone other than you two. Izuku and Momo deflated as they were shot down by their sensei. Young Ajiri! Yes, go ahead, the amphibian-esque girl nodded. The villain team did what they could to prepare. They thought of many different possibilities, and thanks to Yaoyorozu-chan's quirk, they could produce resources that fit whatever needs they had. It boiled down to bad luck that they had to face Jiro-chan and Midoriya-chan. You said it. Midoriya is a freaking maniac, man. Zero muttered under his breath. I'm inclined to agree with Ajiri-kun, Ida added. Despite their best efforts, nothing could successfully combat Midoriya-kun's sheer fighting ability. He swung his arm over to Izuku. It is clear that he has sharpened his skills for quite some time. But that is not to discount Yaoyorozu-kun or Kirishima-kun in any way. They performed admirably. We can all agree upon that fact. Ida received nods of agreement from his peers and from All Might. Absolutely. A loss such as this should only help in keying into your areas of weakness and finding ways to overcome them for the future. That is why you are here, after all. Giving Momo a pat on the back, All Might beamed with pride when she nodded resolutely. Now, enough dilly-dallying. On to the next match. And so, Class 1A carried on according to plan, having the remainder of the battle trials that were set up for that day. Todoroki caught the entirety of the class off guard, the opposing villain team and his own teammate included, by freezing the entire building as soon as their match had started. Despite his best efforts to react in time and not get captured in the Arctic assault, Tokoimi and Dark Shadow found themselves overwhelmed by the magnitude of Todoroki's assault, quickly joining Koda in being stuck to the floor by a thick sheet of ice. Shoto calmly walked into the room where the villains had been frozen and tossed a strip of capture tape over each of their petrified forms. Sorry, I don't care much for beating around the bush. I stopped the ice from crawling too far up your body, so don't worry. He turned to Shoji, who had just made it into the room, shock apparent on his masked face. You want to escort the hostage out, or should I? Feel free to do it, if it's not too much trouble for you. Shoji scratched his temple with one of his diplomy arms. How can he say that so normally after doing something like that? Shoto shrugged and walked over to the corner, where Midnight was situated on top of a crate. My! Another strong young man here to save the day and carry me to safety. Midnight gave the teen a teasing smile but frowned as soon as she felt him untying the rope that immobilized her. She's fine to walk, so you can take her, Shoji. I should defrost those two before they get frostbite. TTT the HH Hero Team WWW-ins. All Might declared through chattering teeth as he and his students stood shivering in the monitor room. Man, that was kinda lame? Kaminari finished Ishido's sentence, still rubbing his arms to try and warm himself back up. The pink-skinned girl shook her head. I was gonna say anticlimactic, but yeah? I wouldn't want to be any of those other three. They didn't even get to do anything. The match after that was not any more of a nail-biter, but it at least proved to be somewhat entertaining to watch. Almost immediately, Ishido and Ajiri seemed to click and pulled off an expert display of teamwork, moving off of each other as they sped down the corridor of the building, right towards Uraraka and Aoyama, who were guarding the door to their base. Ishido used her acid to glide swiftly across the floor, moving as if she were an Olympic speed skater, perfectly in sync with Ajiri, who was using her frog-like abilities to leap from wall to wall. Their quick movements allowed them to dodge Aoyama's laser shots and Uraraka's debris projectiles with ease, and they steadily began pushing their opponents back. Aoyama-kun, we can't keep this up much longer. I'm about to reach my limit. Uraraka could feel herself losing her bearings as her quirk caused her more and more nausea as time went on. Fear not, mademoiselle. I will win this skirmish on my own, using my fabulous quirk and stylish charm. He threw his hands behind his head and thrust his hips forward. Naval laser! A bright beam shot out of Aoyama's belt buckle, narrowly missing Ishido as she ducked under it, almost falling down. Luckily, Ajiri managed to catch her with her tongue and throw her back on course. Thanks! The acid user shot her teammate a thumbs up before turning to her opponent with a smirk. Good try, Aoyama! But you gotta do better than that. Aoyama threw his head back in amusement. Ha! I would not speak so hastily, ma chérie. My quirk is too amazing to be HRGGGHHHH. The blonde boy suddenly lurched over, gripping his stomach. Aoyama-kun, are you okay? Uraraka's head shot over to her teammate, whose stomach began making noises akin to a box of rusty nails inside a wood chipper. This moment of distraction was enough for the hero team to quickly jump onto the offensive. Suyu leapt off of the wall and spun in the air, whipping Ochako hard in her side with her long tongue. Ishido used the momentum from her sliding and leaped in the air, tackling Aoyama to the ground and capturing him. After that, extracting the hostage was fairly simple, resulting in yet another win for the hero teams. After that match's debriefing, it was time for the final bout of the day. It was clear that Bakugo was impatiently waiting for his turn to fight, and he practically dragged Zero by the neck out the door as soon as All Might allowed them to go prep. As soon as they made it to the base of the building, Bakugo released poor Zero and scowled as he eyed the outside of the structure from top to bottom. Hey, weird teeth! Get off your ass, we're going up! Bakugo didn't even turn around when he spoke, opting instead to look over his costume to make sure that all of his gear was in good shape for immediate use. Zero stared up at the building. Like, from the top? Why would we do that? Why the fuck would anyone put their hostage anywhere but the furthest point from the ground floor? That's the problem with this dumb exercise, everyone keeps doing the same shit, and no one on the defending team thinks to try anything else. Glasses and short stack aren't gonna be any different either. Your quirk can get your ass up there, so can mine. Why would we waste time going up from the inside if we can go right to the top and come down on their heads? Taking a few moments to take the explanation in, the lanky teen formed a smile. Alright, I like this plan. You know, you're actually smart for such a rageaholic psycho. Katsuki growled at the barb, causing Zero to step back nervously and throw his hands up in submission. In a good way. The PA sounded off at that moment, alerting both teams that the match had a moment to compose himself. Katsuki clenched his jaw and breathed out slowly. Just shut the fuck up and don't get in my way. You better not fucking get caught either, shitface. Bakugo crouched down, before aiming his palms towards the ground and propelling himself up the side of the building. He landed firmly on the roof and slowly walked towards the door into the building as Zero lagged behind, using his tape to pull himself up. Geez, you couldn't wait a second for me, Bakugo? It's not like you're gonna do this whole battle thing by yourself, is it? The pointed look that Zero received from his partner caused him to sigh in exasperation. I don't give a shit what the fuck you wanna do, just stay out of my way, soy sauce face. Now shut up and listen, Mineta-kun. Compose yourself. We must be on alert at all times for the moment that Bakugo-kun and Zero-kun decide to strike. Ida did his best to try and get his partner to focus on the task at hand, but it seemed like the diminutive teen was much more interested in keeping his eyes on Midnight. While I admire your dedication to making sure that the hostage does not leave your sight, I do not believe you need to be staring so intently, Mineta-kun. Also, you seem to be drooling a bit. Mineta slurped his slobber up and rubbed his chin with his forearm. Hey, we're supposed to be villains, right? So we should act like it and do things that villains would do, right? Ida tapped a finger on the metallic chin of his helmet. You raise a strong argument there. If we were to fully put ourselves into the frame of mind that a nefarious villain would have, it may allow us to absorb the key points of this lesson as much as possible. What did you have in mind for us to do? Mineta rubbed his hands together and giggled darkly. Obviously, we are going to do the most evil and socially forbidden thing that anyone could ever think of. He reached into his suit and pulled out his cell phone. We are gonna illegally stream videos. Oh ho! That is some very evil thinking, Mineta-kun. Ida dashed over to his partner so that both of them could see the screen. Nothing is more wicked than to undermine the genuine hard work of a content creator by eliminating the validity of their professionalism in consuming their product for free. Exactly. And my cousin sent me just the video we can enjoy for free. Apparently, Americans have this thing called Girls Gone Wild and we are gonna enjoy it in all its glow, HH. The pint-sized pervert and tall tin man were suddenly launched backwards onto their backs by an explosion that had put a car-sized hole in the wall. As the dust and smoke from the blast settled, Bakugo stood before them, an animalistic grin on his face. Knock knock, fuckers! He wasted no time in pouncing forward at the disoriented pair, but Ida managed to recover in time to grab Mineta and speed out of harm's way. Bakugo followed their path out of the corner of his eye and shot himself forward to intercept them. Die! Boom! While Katsuki terrorized the villain team, Zero stealthily came into the room and edged his way towards Midnight. Once he saw that the coast was clear, he grabbed her and made for the exit. The good old distract and grab. Not a bad idea. The woman commented as she watched the series of explosions throughout the room from over Zero's shoulder. As he scaled down the building, the screaming he heard, surely Mineta, made the tape user shudder slightly. I guess it's a good thing he was my partner. Hurry up and take Midnight to the exit boundary, shitbag. Or maybe not. Almost everyone in the class was relieved to finally be finished for the day, and after All Might's lecture at the end of the lesson, many savored the hot showers afterwards to soothe their tired bodies. Now that was a class! I can't wait to do more hands-on stuff. Ashido buttoned the top of her uniform up and plopped down on the locker room bench with a sigh. It was way more exciting than sitting in class and learning boring junk. Ajiri wrung the water out of her hair as she sat down next to her. I think you just don't like classes that require books, Ashido-chan. The pink-skinned girl couldn't help but get bashful at that comment, chuckling lightly. Yeah, but it was definitely fun, Jiro added, slapping her on the back playfully. Ochako couldn't help but laugh. You're just saying that 'cause you and Deku-kun totally kicked butt. I guess you got me there, she replied with a light smile. Sorry again about that, Yayarosa. The ponytailed girl waved her off. No need to feel sorry, Jiro-san. You were doing what was expected of you in the exercise. Besides, despite being defeated like we were, I found it to be enjoyable. Nanny, we're all gonna be classmates. Why don't we all call each other by our first names? What do you say, girls? Hagakure excitedly suggested. No one else in the room could find any reason to object, and so all 6 girls of 1A officially began their first name basis friendship. Okay, now that we are all besties for life, we need to talk about something very important. I'm talking life or death. The floating set of clothes gained the full attention of all the other girls. We need to discuss, boys. That's life or death? You really need to check your priorities, dude, Jiro said with a sweat drop. Of course. Gossip is the overarching goal of anyone's daily life, and if it's gossip about romance and love, it's even more important. Mina leaped to her feet and stood next to Toru in solidarity. We gotta gossip about boys to our heart's content. First things first, who do you guys think is the cutest boy in class? Todoroki-chan is pretty cute, Karo. He reminds of those erasers that are 2 colors. Oh, totally, girl. Or maybe one of those soft-serve ice creams. He could give me brain freeze any day. I don't really think about that kind of stuff with boys, Karo. But I can understand why you could think that, Toru-chan. Midoriya and Kirishima are good-looking. I bet Kirishima spends more time on his hair in the morning than we do combined, though. That might drive any girl crazy if they were outmatched like that. I knew Kiri since middle school. I can definitely confirm that that is true. But I like his spiky hair, cause it makes us horn buddies. Several oohs made Mina shake her head in amusement. But we're just friends, you guys. Yeah, what about Kaminari-kun and Bakugo-kun? They're both good-looking, too. Although, Bakugo-kun would probably get mad if anyone complimented him about anything. You all raise good arguments, girls. There are definitely plenty of cutie pies to choose from in the class. How can we decide on just one? And did you see some of those costumes? Toru squealed while waving her arms back and forth in front of her. Why in the world are we talking about this, everyone? The girls turned to Momo, who had just finished getting dressed, and shot them all an annoyed look. We should make the most of our time to rest and prepare for class tomorrow. Heaven only knows what will be in store for us. Getting a series of groans from her classmates, Momo failed to notice the floating UA uniform coming up behind her. Geez, don't be such a party pooper, Momo-chan. How about we talk about something a little more spicy than just who we think is cute in class? Midoriya is one lucky guy, isn't he? Getting to see you in all your glory? She teased as she grabbed Momo's ample chest. Momo went beet red and abruptly pushed herself off of the invisible girl. Toru-san, please! Can we not bring that up? It was very embarrassing for me. She covered her burning face as the other girls giggled at her. Deku-kun definitely wouldn't try anything perverted, so you don't have to worry about that. He has a girl he likes already anyways. Ochako blinked and suddenly found herself cornered by Mina and Toru, who were staring expectantly at her. He does. Tell us everything. Spare no detail. Spill the tea. Ochako began sweating nervously as the 2 hyperactive girls began hounding her for information. She looked to the other 3 for a source of salvation, but the looks of intrigue on their faces told Ochako that she was on her own. All right. I'll tell. Achoo. Whoa, you all right there, Midoriya? Ojiro handed the sniffling greenette a tissue so he could wipe his nose. After blowing his airways clear, he thanked his classmate and tossed the tissue in the trash. Yeah, I'm fine. Maybe someone's talking about you. Most of the boys merely shrugged at Zero and went back to getting changed. What, you guys have never heard that superstition before? Several of the less socially active boys had already gone back to the dorms after changing out of their hero costumes, which left Midoriya, Kaminari, Zero, Ojiro, and reluctantly, Bakugo behind in the change rooms. Deku, can you hurry the fuck up so we can go? I'm tired of waiting for your slow ass. Why do you have to wait for him? If you're in such a hurry, why don't you just go back by yourself? Who asked you, Sparky? Bakugo snapped at the blonde. He grumpily slung his bag over his shoulder and pulled Ojiro by the tail behind him as he made for the door. Whatever. Come on, monkey boy. Don't sit on your ass forever, Deku. It's already 5. Ojiro's sweat dropped as his roommate dragged him out of the change room, waving to the remaining boys. After the pair left, Kaminari turned to Midoriya with a skeptical glance. I don't know how you can be such good friends with that guy, Midoriya. Yeah, the fact that you haven't run for the hills like your life depended on it yet is pretty damn surprising, Zero added. Izuku let out a light chuckle, slightly confusing the other 2 boys. Everyone always says that, believe it or not. Kaken cares. He has his own way of showing it, but he's always been there for me since we were kids. So I've learned to put up with him just like he puts up with me, and you may think I'm lying, but Kaken was a lot worse when we were younger. He's calmed down quite a bit. Shiro and Kaminari shared a disbelieved look, both somehow trying to manage a Katsuki that was more menacing and angry than the one they had just become acquainted with. They shuddered at the image in their minds. He takes some time to understand, trust me. It doesn't shock me at all that you guys aren't too warmed up to him yet. He was even thoughtful enough to remind me that it was 5 so I could call. Izuku clamped his lips shut as he had caught himself just in time before spilling out some very personal information in mere casual conversation. His suddenly odd behavior caused some raised eyebrows from his classmates, making him internally curse for his slip-up. Call? Oh, so you plan to call someone later today? Shiro asked. Kaminari, being the person that he was, immediately jumped to the conclusion that Izuku was calling a very special person and slid up to him in his seat with a smirk on his face. Oh, don't tell me, Midoriya, you need to call your girlfriend? You and Uraraka may not be together, but are you holding out on us about another special lady in your life? He wrapped an arm around Izuku's shoulder and cupped his own chin confidently. Kaminari Nizan will teach you all about love, don't worry. Getting redder by the second, Izuku shook his head and made some distance between himself and the blonde. No, you're getting the wrong idea, Kaminari-kun. I meant to say that I'm calling. His mind kicked into overdrive trying to come up with a good alternative answer. My mom. Yeah, that's it. I promised my mom I would call her and tell her how things were going. Izuku began sweating as he waited to see if he would be believed, and as soon as they nodded that his words made sense, he grabbed his things and dashed out of the room, a faint trace of sparks left in his wake. Okay, bye, see you later. After seeing Izuku disappear, Kaminari turned to Shiro. You're thinking what I'm thinking, right? Totally, he's not fooling anybody. He nodded in agreement. Midoriya is totally a mama's boy. Panting as he successfully made his escape, Izuku leaned against the door of his bedroom in relief. That was close. Putting his bag down, he instinctively turned around and threw his arms out in time for Nozomi to leap onto him, licking his face gleefully. You thought you could sneak up on me, girl? Nice try. Just then, Izuku's phone rang, the familiar light ringtone notifying him who was on the other line trying to video call with him. Shooing Nozomi away until she reluctantly made herself comfy on the edge of his bed, Izuku grabbed his earphones and went out onto the balcony. Hello, Izuku? Hiya. How's it going? You have a good day? Izuku couldn't help but smile when he saw Tadame appear on the small screen of his cell phone, sitting comfortably in bed in a set of teal pajamas with her ash blonde hair let down and framing her delicate face perfectly. I'm doing okay. Classes have been pretty eventful already. After explaining all of the exciting things that had taken place in such a short time at UA, Izuku could feel himself grinning from ear to ear at how attentive and interested that Tadame was in hearing about how things were going. What about you? How have things been going at Ketsubutsu? Tadame's eyes lit up. I'm having a lot of fun. Since we're in second year now, we get to learn a lot more complex stuff than last year. And I've been working on a ton of new stuff with my quirk that even you would be amazed by. I can't wait then. We should spar the next time we get to see each other. Tadame giggled cutely, but suddenly grew slightly flustered, and her head began slowly sinking into her body, a cue that Izuku came to know as when she was getting nervous. Haha, yeah, I really can't wait to see you again. But I'm not sure when I'll be able to with how busy things are gonna be. Yeah, I don't know when I'd get time off at all with how hectic UA gets right off the bat. Maybe during summer break, hopefully. It hurt Izuku that he couldn't see Tadame, and the expression she wore told him that she felt the same. It was a bittersweet situation for the green-headed teen, who was still coming to terms with his own feelings, but he was at least glad that she enjoyed talking to and being around him. Yeah, we'll figure something out, okay? Nothing's gonna keep me away from you forever, got that? She gave him a reassuring smile that fully quelled his frown, and he smiled back at her widely. Yeah. It was as if something clicked in Izuku's heart at that moment, and he felt himself getting warm from top to bottom. Whether it was her heartfelt words, the fact that he missed her so much, or a combination of a myriad of factors, Izuku's mind was made up. I definitely have to confess the next time we meet. Who knows when we will get to see each other? Before Izuku even realized, the pavilion and surrounding area that was visible from his balcony were being solely illuminated by the numerous streetlights that had come on after the sun had made its exit for the day. It's already so late. I didn't even notice that we were talking for like 3 hours. A deep rumble from Izuku's stomach caught his attention, pulling a groan out his throat. Man, I totally forgot about dinner. Sliding the glass door open, he went inside and swiftly laid out a bowl of food and water for Nozomi. I'm sorry, girl, you must have been starved. Leaving his dog to her dinner, Izuku left his room for the kitchen, intent on getting some food himself. It was an odd sensation for Izuku to be down in the common area by himself, as the only other times he'd been in it, the rest of his classmates were all out, and about doing various things. To be fair, he didn't know what else to expect at almost 10 p.m. on a school night, but the eerie quietness still made him slightly antsy. Mulling over his options, Izuku leaned his arms on the open French doors of the fridge, trying to grasp a taste that he was craving at the moment. Man, this is hard. He then noticed a bento box sitting in the back of the fridge with a large post-it note attached to the top of the lid. Let's see. He grabbed the box off of the shelf and perused over the note, which was written in bold red letters. Dipshit nerd, you took your damn sweet-ass time talking to your girlfriend and forgot to eat again like a fucking idiot. Round Face wanted to make some food for you, but her cooking was shit, so I had to fix it so it was actually edible. Eat the fucking food if you know what's good for you. Izuku couldn't help but chuckle at Katsuki's antics, and gratefully grabbed a pair of chopsticks and a glass of milk to go with his dinner. Opening the lid, Izuku's eyes sparkled when he immediately recognized a version of Mitsuki-san's famous chicken fried rice, a meal that he and Katsuki had eaten countless times growing up. Licking his lips, Izuku swiftly threw the portion into the microwave and impatiently waited to dig into his food. About halfway through his plate of mouth-watering fried rice, the elevator chimed, shifting Izuku's attention over to that direction, curious as to who else would be down in the common area at this time. The door opened to reveal Ochako and Momo, both in pajama bottoms and tank tops, as their slippered feet shuffled towards him. Noticing the messy-haired teen, Ochako perked up and gave him a wave. Oh, hey Deku-kun! I see you found the rice that Bakugo-kun made for you. I wanted to make some dinner for you, but he kept saying I would mess it up and just made food by himself. Swallowing his umpteenth mouthful, Izuku waved her off. Don't worry about Kaken. I appreciate that you thought about me, regardless. What are you doing eating dinner so late, Midoriya-san? Eating at this hour is not the healthiest way to live, you know. You need more time to digest a meal before you sleep. A routine like this will surely interfere with your overall functionality during the day. Momo chided. Oh, I had some things to take care of and I just sorta lost track of time. This isn't a habit I want to keep up, believe me. Nodding in approval, Momo walked by him towards the fridge. That's good to hear. What about you guys? What are you doing? Izuku pointed his chopsticks back and forth between his two female classmates. Ochako-san and I are both still too unaccustomed to our new rooms to be able to sleep properly, so we agreed that a cup of chamomile tea might aid in combating our insomnia. I guess I'm just still kinda freaked out by how huge our room is. Even splitting the room with Momo-chan, it's still bigger than any other place I've ever lived in, the brunette bashfully admitted as she sat down next to her best friend. Interestingly enough, I have the opposite problem. The room is a tad bit stuffy for me to be used to so quickly. It's about the size of my third closet at home, Momo added, causing the other two teens to sweat drop at her genuinely innocent and unintentional flaunting of her massive wealth. Yeah, that's fair. I think if I didn't have Nozomi with me, it would be way harder for me to sleep. Todoroki-kun definitely doesn't help with making me feel comfortable. He grumbled the last bit, shoveling some food in his mouth in the process. Momo finished pouring the tea for herself and Ochako and took a seat at the kitchen island as well, stirring warm milk into her glass. Oh, are you and Todoroki-san not getting along very well? Izuku scoffed. That's an understatement. The first thing he said to me was that he isn't interested in being friends, and is just here to be the best and beat all of us. Not exactly the friendliest guy in the world. That's too bad. It must be quite the challenge to share a living space with a person who has no intentions of forming any sort of amicable relationship with you. I myself am quite fortunate to have a person like Ochako-san as a roommate. We have already gotten along quite well. The two girls smiled at each other as they clinked their cups of tea together. Yeah! Momo-chan is great! She totally needs to join our squad. The rich girl set her cup back into her saucer and leaned her chin on her hand. Pleasant things aside, do you have some sort of plan in order to at least find some common ground between yourself and Todoroki-san so that you aren't living in such a hostile environment? Izuku sighed and took a long sip from his drink. I wish it were that easy. I can only do so much, you know. Friendship, respect, amiability, they're all two-way streets. He has to be willing to make an effort just as much as I am for there to be anything like that. It's not the worst thing in the world, because he mostly does his own thing and doesn't interact with me unless he absolutely has to. All I can really do at the moment is wait. Izuku looked out of the corner of his eye to see Ochako staring intently at him and his plate of food. Yes? The brunette said nothing but lowered her head to just above the level of the island's surface, inches away from Izuku's rice. After a few moments of silence, Izuku realized what Ochako was thinking. You want some? Ochako lifted her head to meet Izuku's eye level. Bakugo-kun yelled at me when I tried to taste some before. Can I? She excitedly asked. Izuku laughed out loud and scooped some up into his chopsticks. Don't let Kaken get to you. Here. He held out his hand and Ochako gratefully ate the helping, hands immediately trembling in satisfaction. That's so good! She exclaimed. Who knew that spiky rage ball could make such good food? Izuku nodded in agreement, and they too had several more mouthfuls before Momo clearing her throat caught their attention. Huh! What's up, Yaoyorozu-san? And why are you so red? She blushed harder and looked away. How can you two act in such a manner with such reckless abandon? Sharing eating utensils is far too intimate for students to be without crossing the line into inappropriate behavior. Izuku and Ochako looked at each other in confusion before turning back to the onyx-haired girl with tilted heads. What's the big deal? I don't get it. You never shared food with your friends as a kid, Momo-chan? No, something like that would have caused my parents to be quite upset. Such things were deemed unbecoming of a young lady. That's no fun. Izuku pursed his lips and thought. Well, do you want some? We aren't gonna get mad at you for it. He grabbed some rice and held it out in front of Momo, who gasped and recoiled backwards in embarrassment. What? How can you suggest such a thing, Midoriya-san? Izuku's unaffected expression made Momo panic even more. How can he be so calm about this? Does he not understand the severity of what he is suggesting? Eating off of his chopsticks. That is nothing short of an indirect kiss. I absolutely cannot accept such an offer without the proper steps taken. I am not the type of woman to do such a thing. Suddenly, Ochako grabbed the chopsticks from Izuku and inched closer to her roommate. Come on, it won't hurt, Momo-chan. It's really tasty. Open up! No! As Ochako chased a frantic Momo around the island with his food, Izuku watched with a mix of amusement and sadness. I still wanted to finish eating though. Aizawa Shota was many things. He was a distinguished pro-hero with many years of vigilant work under his belt. He was a reliable educator responsible for siring the next generation of heroes. Aizawa Shota was also not many things. He was not a person that enjoyed wasting time, as it was a precious resource that one could never get back, save some sort of time-altering quirk. He did not enjoy very windy days, as it contributed to his dry eye. But above all else, Aizawa Shota was not a morning person. It was bad enough that the scruffy pro-hero's internal clock was severely out of whack due to years of night patrols. But if that were not enough, Shota also worked in a field that required attentive involvement from early in the morning. Many people criticized him for his seemingly eternal drowsiness and lackadaisical enthusiasm in everyday life, but his rebuttal to that was, try being in charge of dozens of angsty hormone-filled teens with superpowers and see how cheery and jubilant you would be. Some mornings were manageable. Ones that contained few to no inconveniences or instances of annoyance. Eraser! Good morning! Can I get YHHH? But alas, with certain individuals, those manageable mornings were very few and far between. Must you be so obnoxiously troublesome as soon as the day begins? Aizawa grumbled, putting the finishing touches on his lesson plan for the day. He sighed and slid back in his chair, slowly rising to his feet. Did you send that memo to the principal like you were supposed to? Of course. Give me some more credit than that, Eraser. I may be a hippity-cool teacher and not a grouchy old man like you, but I'm not incompetent. Glaring skeptically at his longtime colleague, Aizawa internally debated for a moment whether that point was really worth contesting, but quickly gave up in favor of saving himself a headache, shrugging and beginning to walk away. Sure, I'll take your word for it. Here's hoping the students don't give us too much trouble since it's their first time going to the USJ. Just as he was leaving the teacher's lounge, Aizawa caught something out of his peripherals that made him groan in irritation. Looking outside the large glass window, Aizawa narrowed his eyes at the gaggle of reporters clamoring outside of the front gate, bothering students as they tried to enter the grounds. Sigh, damn press never knows when to quit. Come on, Mike. Let's go deal with the pests. Izuku, Ochako, Bakugo, and Momo were making their way from the dorms towards UA campus for class, the pair of girls walking ahead of the boys. Bakugo stared at the back of Momo's head, arms crossed behind his head, before he turned to Izuku. Why the hell is Ponytail here again? Come on, Kaken. Be nice. Yaoyorozu-san is Uraraka-san's roommate, and she is her and I's friend. We're all gonna be classmates for a long time anyway, so isn't it a good idea to try and be friends with each other? Katsuki rolled his eyes at his green-haired friend. I ain't gonna be buddy-buddy with people just cause we are in the same room. I don't give a fuck about your shitty camaraderie, Deku. If Ponytail and Machi Face are gonna hang around you, I don't fucking care, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna do shit. As far as I'm concerned, you're the only person I can even tolerate around here, and that's not saying much. Tilting his head in confusion, Izuku stared at Katsuki. What about Kendo-san? Hearing the Orangehead's name, Katsuki sputtered and snapped his head away from Izuku so that the look of annoyed embarrassment could not be seen. He hated himself for immediately thinking back to the image of Kendo in her motorcycle suit, skin-tight spandex and all, cursing under his breath and trying to calm his blush. Fat Hands is annoying. All she does is nag me and complain about fucking everything. Every time she opens her goddamn mouth it's to say something that pisses me off. I fucking finally got out of my house and away from that old hag to fucking have to deal with another bitch that doesn't leave me the fuck alone. As Katsuki went on and on about Itsuka and how much she annoyed him, Izuku broke into a smile and looked forward. I've never heard Kaken talk about someone so much in one sitting. I'm glad he has other people he thinks of as friends besides me. The protege of All Might was shaken out of his thoughts when he bumped into Ochako's back, as she and Momo had stopped dead in their tracks a few feet from the front of the school. All four of the students looked on at the mob of reporters and camera crews standing just outside of the threshold into the grounds, and before they knew it, they themselves were being swarmed by members of the press. You're UA students, right? Please answer some questions about the school. We are getting the scoop from these kids for sure. Somehow, the teens got cornered by the media persons, having nowhere to hide from the plethora of questions. But thankfully, Aizawa and Mike suddenly showed up to save them from the horde. Alright, listeners. That's quite enough. We are gonna need you folks to vacate the premises ASAP. Iruni. President Mike gave the stunned reporters a thumbs up with one hand and gave them a shoo-shoo motion with the other. Some of the reporters grew discouraged at the dismissal at the hands of the pro-heroes, but a few greenhorns decided to press their luck and probe further. This was a grave mistake, as Mike tagged in Aizawa to deal with the riff-raff, and the scraggly hobo cosplayer wasted no time in turning his intimidation factor on to full effect, causing the media members to step back in fear of his glaring gaze. You people should find some better things to do than to pester high school students who are trying to get to class. You four, he called out to the group of teens. Hurry along and get to class. The bell is going to ring in a few moments. They all nodded at their sensei and promptly made their way inside. Still standing firmly rooted in the gateway, Aizawa crossed his arms and gave the press one last look of vexation before turning on his heel and making his way into the building himself. The reporters that had yet to flee all sighed in exasperation at being denied their scoops, grumbling to themselves and each other. God, those UA teachers are so stingy. Why can't they just answer a few of our questions? We're doing our jobs just like them. One female reporter said to her cameraman. I need some content. She looked around to see if the coast was clear. Hey, let's get in there and see what we can get. A few others noticed her intentions and tried to warn her, but she was already about to cross the boundary into the campus. Just as her first step was about to plant down, a blaring alarm went off and a thick metal door suddenly shot out of the ground, effectively shutting any trespassers out from being able to gain entry. One of the older reporters shook his head and pulled the young woman back. I was gonna warn you about that, kid. These hero people are real big on security, for obvious reasons. There's no getting in there now. Let's get out of here. The last few bits of media people began trickling away from the gate one by one, all passing but paying no mind to a hooded individual lurking several feet away with gaze fixated on the now locked-out entrance. A pair of glowing red eyes shone through the dark abyss on their shoulders, an unseen malicious grin forming on their face. All walls must fall in order for foundations to be built anew. Isn't that what you always told me, sensei? Take your seats and quiet down. We have some things to take care of, so don't waste time. Aizawa called out as he slowly strode into the room, his class immediately obeying his instructions to avoid the no-nonsense teacher's wrath. Now then, first things first, there is one thing that requires immediate attention, and it is extremely important for each and every single one of you moving forward. At these words, the class grew an air of simultaneous excitement and anxiety. No one had any idea as to what Aizawa was referring to, but from their experiences from him already, they all had a feeling that it would be something crazy. Right here. Right now. All of you. Desks creaked at how hard the students leaned forward in anticipation. You are going to select a class representative. He was answered immediately with numerous faceplants on desk surfaces. After the initial shock of such anticlimactic announcement, shouting matches began throughout the room, be almost every single student making their case as to why they should be selected as 1A's class rep. A vein formed on Aizawa's forehead at the ruckus breaking out in his class, but before he could explode, Ida had luckily gained the attention of everyone else. Everyone! This is no way for upstanding students of an acclaimed institution as UA should behave. We will get nowhere with this incessant hollering among each other with no regard for anyone else's arguments. Ida's robotic gesticulating came dangerously close to the back of Ajui's head, but the girl seemed unfazed. I declare that the only just way to go about this is to have an anonymous vote to determine who is most worthy of the position. Ida failed to notice the irony of the fact that his other arm was still raised straight in the air from when Aizawa first declared that the class needed a rep. But not everyone knows each other that well yet. Wouldn't most people just vote for themselves, Karo? That is precisely why we should have a vote. Anyone who gets multiple votes will irrefutably be the most deserving as determined by the rest of our class. No one seemed to object this proposition, and then turned to their sensei for a final confirmation. Aizawa merely shrugged and began crawling into his sleeping bag. I don't care. As long as you're done before homeroom is over. With that, Class 1A's representational election officially began. Ida collected the last of the votes in the official 1A ballot box. Momo's quirk really was the best, and made his way to the podium at the front of the room. Alright, now that everyone has casted their votes, I will count the votes and declare a winner. The bespectacled teen emptied the slips of paper onto the podium, and the class waited with bated breath to know who would get the most votes. Ahem. The votes have been tallied. As of this moment, with 4 votes, our class representative is Midoriya Izuku. A small applause broke out for the boy, with him giving out a warm smile and walking up to the front, a firm handshake from Ida waiting for him. Congratulations, Midoriya-kun. I hope that you accept the role with pride and represent us well. Thank you, Ida-kun. I'll do my best. Ida turned back to the class and cleared his throat. Now, I believe it to stand to reason that for the position of vice representative, Midoriya-kun should appoint who he wants to work with him. I disagree, actually. Izuku spoke up. I don't want it to seem that I picked any one person out of bias. That's unfair to everyone else. Ignoring the yell of anger from Bakugo that Izuku was a pussy that was scared to be a man and pick him, he turned to Ida. Whoever got the second most votes deserves to be the vice rep, at least in my opinion. Pausing to think for a moment, Ida nodded. That does seem like a fair way to go about it. Majority rules, after all. Well, with that being said, the person who came in second place had 3 votes. Congratulations, Yayorozu-kun. The girl at the back of the class gasped in surprise, a small blush on her face. As the rest of the class congratulated her, a smile formed on her face as she made her way to the front to join Izuku before their peers. The greenette smiled at his new vice rep. Congrats, Yayorozu-san. I'm glad to be working with you. Please take care of me. Momo bowed in return. I'm looking forward to it as well. Let us work hard in representing the class. As if on cue, Aizawa woke up from his nap, still in his sleeping bag chrysalis. Now that is over with, you two will meet with the rep and vice rep of Class 1B after lunch. Homeroom is about to end, so you have free time until then. Just before he went back to his spot in the corner of the room, Aizawa whipped back around to face his class with a stoic frown. But if I'm woken up, there will be consequences. The class had never been so silent. The group of Izuku, Katsuki, Ochako, Momo, and Itsuka sat eating lunch together, all enjoying their own personal meals made by Lunch Rush, UA's incredible gourmet chef. Why the fuck didn't you pick me for vice rep, you fucking nerd? Katsuki took the time between shoveling generous spoonfuls of mapo tofu into his mouth to chastise Izuku for his decision in homeroom earlier. Come on, Kaken. You know that wouldn't be fair. Just because I'm the class rep, it doesn't mean I can just do whatever I want. That's 'cause you're a fucking bitch. Oh. Katsuki rubbed his head where Kendo had just smacked him. You wanna die? Not even slightly fazed by Katsuki yelling right in her face, Kendo crossed her arms. You had it coming. Stop being such a jerk. Katsuki growled, but said nothing more and went back to his lunch. As the only one not used to it, Momo looked at the orange-haired girl in awe, before leaning over to whisper in Ochako's ear. How did she do that, huh? Oh, Itsuka-chan is the only one besides Deku-kun that can get Bakugo-kun to listen to them. They've been like this since we met at the entrance exams. Making an "oh" expression, Momo scratched her chin. It seems as though making friends at the entrance exam is quite the common occurrence. Anyway, it's pretty cool that you got voted as rep for your class, Midoriya. We're gonna be working together a lot from now on, then. Kendo noted with a smile. Oh, so you're 1B's class rep, huh? It's nice to see that you're getting along so well with your classmates already, Kendo-san. I look forward to working with you. The pair of reps shared a smile, then returned to their meals, engaging in whatever small talk the other 3 members of their table were currently having. A sudden shout of Izuku's name drew everyone's attention towards Ida, who was marching up to them with lunch tray in hand. Greetings, my peers! Would it be alright if I shared eating space with you today? No one seemed to have a problem with the idea. Katsuki's outburst about it promptly ignored, so Ida sat down in the empty seat next to Kendo with a nod. You know, I'm pretty surprised you suggested we vote for class rep, Ida-kun. Didn't y'all want the job just as badly as everyone else? Ochako wondered aloud. While you are correct in saying that I did desire the position, that is irrelevant. The best candidate for the position supersedes selfish wants. That's why I voted for Midoriya-kun. It was clear to me that he was most deserving. This piece of information surprised everyone, but none more than the moss-headed class rep himself. Really? Wow, I don't know what to say, Ida-kun. Thank you very much for your confidence in me. Wait, I wonder who else voted for me then? Izuku turned to the other members of his table to observe a nonchalantly whistling Ochako, an angrily pouting Katsuki, and a bashful-looking Momo. All of you guys? Before any of them could reply, a blaring alarm suddenly began pouring out of the PA system. Almost immediately, students began clamoring about, panicking about what in the world was going on. What the hell is going on here? Kendo's voice was barely audible over the deafening screech of the alarm mixed with the mass hysteria that overtook the cafeteria. Next to their table, another group of students had just recovered from the shock of the alarm first sounding off and were preparing to leave. You guys are first years, right? That alarm means there's an intruder! He screamed before following his companions before the exit. That was enough of an explanation for Izuku and Co. At the moment for them to pull themselves out of shock and make for the nearest exit themselves, they managed to get out into the hallway. But their success ended there, as they all swiftly got swept up into the sea of bodies that could have well been threatening to burst out of the building's walls. He had no idea when or how it had happened, but Izuku had found himself bumped and jostled around enough where he had gotten close enough to the window to see out of it to the grounds below. Aren't those the reporters from this morning? Squeezing through bodies, Izuku winced at the elbows and knees being thrown at him from all directions, stumbling around until he bumped into a familiar jet-black ponytail a few inches above his eyeline next to a much shorter brunette bob, the pair trying their best to not get hit by the countless limbs and torsos being thrown around. Yaoyorozu-san? Uraraka-san? Midoriya-san? It's impossible for anyone to get anywhere. What should we do? Grunting in effort, Izuku finally managed to pull himself completely free of the crowd and got him and Momo just enough personal space so that they could stand straight. I saw what was going on. The press from this morning somehow managed to get onto the school grounds. I need to get everyone's attention somehow. He racked his brain for an idea as fast as he could before the panicked mosh pit started back up. Come on, think. Think. Just as the pushing and shoving began once more, the ninth wielder of One for All activated his pass-down quirk just enough so that he was able to jump above the sea of students, allowing him a few seconds of looking around to gauge the situation. Guess I have no choice. Good thing I remembered to wear my suit under my uniform today. Utilizing his natural-born quirk this time, Izuku morphed into the form of a howler monkey, perching himself on the top of the frame of the doorway, his Yui uniform left billowing in the air thanks to his swift movements. Hoo 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 hoo! The guttural screeching that emanated from Izuku's monkey throat stopped every single student dead in their tracks. Anyone who thought their ears were safe when the school's intruder alarm finally subsided were rudely awakened, but the oral assault had its intended results in gaining undivided attention. Not squandering this opportunity, Izuku reverted and stood up on the frame, hands cupped around his mouth as a makeshift megaphone. Guys, it's just the press. Take it easy, there's no intruders. The crowd took in his words and the chaos died down considerably. Izuku sighed in relief when the mob began to disperse and go back to their business. Leaping back onto the floor, he was shocked when several of his classmates ran up to him, praising him for his handling of the situation. Dude, that was so manly, Midoriya. You totally handled that like a champ. Kirishima threw his arm around Izuku and gave him a toothy grin. That's our class rep for ya. Coming up on his other side, Mina gushed at the greenette about his animal transformation. Midoriya, that monkey form is totally cute. How could you hide such a sick part of your quirk from us? That actually reminds me, Karo. Everyone turned to Ajri, who had her tongue slightly hanging out of her mouth and an inquisitive index finger resting on her chin. When you use your quirk, what happens to your suit, Midoriya-chan? The question that the amphibious girl posed had everyone's eyes widen in surprise and they all turned to Izuku with equal wonderment and curiosity. Hey, what does happen to your suit? I figured that you wore that suit of yours cause it was made of some kind of special thread or something that wouldn't rip when you transformed. But, when you become an animal, you're not wearing anything. This insight from Uraraka only aided in fueling the flames under the hot seat that the green-headed dual quirk user had suddenly found himself on. To be fair, it was an entirely reasonable line of questioning to have. Izuku wore his suit when he was in his human form, and whenever he used his omnimorph quirk and transformed into any animal, he was somehow not wearing his suit until he became human again. Did his transformation cause some sort of rift in space that somehow managed to suck off his costume any time that he turned into an animal? Was there some sort of spiritual link between Izuku and his suit that allowed him to call on it any time that he wanted, like it was some sort of sentient being? The possibilities were endless. These questions and countless more running rampant throughout Izuku's classmates, as they stood on edge for any semblance of an explanation for this enigmatic phenomenon from the man himself. Izuku sighed deeply to himself. Alright, I guess there's no avoiding it. I know, it's a really weird phenomenon. 1 second my suit is there, I use omnimorph, poof! It's gone. I turn back, poof! It's there again. Well, the truth is... The anticipation among the group was almost palpable. I don't actually know what happens to my suit. The disappointed face faulting that followed was definitely palpable. But I am glad for whatever the hell keeps my suit. I used to always be naked after using my quirk. Somewhere on the other side of UA's campus, a certain large and muscular blonde let out a sneeze. Outside of UA's main building, Nizu, Aizawa, Hound Dog and Ectoplasm stood at the front gate, or what remained of it rather, all with varying expressions of suspicion and disconcertment on their faces. I'm sure we all know that no mere news reporters would be capable of something like this. A particularly volatile quirk would have to be possessed to completely destroy the 6-inch thick steel door that once stood here. The principal explained. He paced back and forth with his arms behind his back. This was either some kind of random act of quirk abuse in public, or some kind of targeted attack. The latter is much more plausible, I'm sure that is clear. Aizawa idly commented, hands dug into his saga pockets as he kicked at a small pile of dust that once formed part of the school's gate. Whoever did this certainly succeeded in sending a message, but the question is, what exactly were they trying to tell us? Well said, Eraser. Principal, how shall we proceed from here? Ectoplasm asked. Turning to the math teacher with his usual smile, Nizu shook his head. The only thing we can do. Continue as usual, at least on the surface. This issue is surely something that needs to be investigated, but there is no reason to alarm out students or bring any unwanted attention to it. We proceed with things as planned, and move in stride if any other issues arise. The last thing we want to do is show some sort of weakness that may invite any individuals to our doorstep bringing trouble. After the chaotic ordeal that was the lunchtime incident, classes returned to normal quite quickly. It was to be expected, after all. A school entirely dedicated to fostering individuals that would be the first responders to crises would have to be able to rein in excitement and return to business as usual as if nothing had happened in the first place. As per their duties as Class 1A's rep and vice-rep, Izuku and Momo had hastily made their way to the first year's student council room, where the inaugural first-year rep meeting was to be held. Being the last ones to arrive, all eyes were on the pair from 1A as they took their seats. I'm terribly sorry that we kept you waiting. Momo politely greeted with a bow of her head, her action mirrored by Izuku. Don't worry about it, we haven't waited that long. And now that everyone is here, we can get started. Itsuka began. This meeting is just a formality of sorts. A chance for us to get to know each other and start relationships among the first-year classes so we can all get along. Standing up out of her seat for a moment, the Orangeette faced the rest of the reps with a bow. My name is Kendo Itsuka, rep of Class 1B. And this is my vice-rep, Shiozaki Ibara. Said vine-headed girl at Itsuka's side gave the room a dip of her head. Directly across from Kendo, one student scoffed, leaning back in his chair with his arms folded behind the messy indigo hair that stuck out of his head in every direction. Through his tired-looking and half-lidded eyes, he gazed sharply at the 4 hero course students. You're wasting your time. With furrowed brows, Kendo crossed her arms in indignation. What exactly do you mean by that? Take a look around. There's 4 of you for 2 hero course classes. There's 3 gen ed classes, and yet me and her are the only ones here. He stuck a thumb to his left, causing the petite blonde-haired girl with pigtails sitting next to him to squeak and bury her face in her shirt collar. There's 3 support classes and they only have 1 person here. Hey-ya! A girl with pink dreadlocks hollered, not even looking up from the contraption in her hands with which she was doing who knows what. Same thing with the business course. It's just that guy. Said Guy, sitting to his right, put his phone call on hold to give everyone else an annoyed expression before returning to his private conversation. You hero course kids have all the power at UA and get all the special treatment, so why would any of us want to be friends with you? Spare me. The purple-haired boy stood abruptly and made for the door, but paused and looked over his shoulder. As far as I'm concerned, all you hero course kids are the only things keeping people like us from getting anywhere. Shinso-kun! The small blonde quietly yelled to the exiting teen, her timid voice muffled by her collar. Oh, we're done? Cool, later. The pink-haired tinkerer leaped out of her seat and dashed out the door, not once looking up from the work in her hands. Well, this has been about as productive as I thought it would be. If you'll excuse me. Once the business course rep left, the 4 hero course students shared downtrodden expressions. Excuse me. Everyone turned to the remaining gen ed student, who blushed at all of the eyes on her and began poking her fingers together nervously. I'm sorry for Shinso-kun's behavior. Most people in general education have a grudge against the hero course because they didn't make it in. Almost jumping out of her seat in realization, the girl bowed her head up and down repeatedly. I am Futaba Kid. It's nice to meet you. You don't have a problem with the hero course like your classmate, Futaba-san? Momo asked. The blonde shook her head, pigtails flopping to and fro. I never had any dreams to be a hero, exactly, And you haven't done anything that seems arrogant or elitist, so I don't have a reason to hate you. Sharing a few looks with each other, the four hero students gave the girl friendly grins. But I should probably go back to class. It was nice to meet you all, she said before briskly exiting the room. I feel like she reminds me of someone familiar, like the timidness, the super politeness, the stuttering. Izuku stopped his pondering at the odd looks from the other three remaining students in the room. Just thinking out loud, don't worry about it. Yeah, well, I guess there's no use in sitting around here anymore. We should probably get back to class too. Kendo's shoulders slumped as she and Ibra stood up, bidding the remaining reps in the room farewell before heading off towards their own classroom. Well, I suppose that could have gone better. Momo turned to Izuku with a weak grin. I'll give you credit. You have made 2 enemies in our first 2 days of class. That must be some sort of record, Midoriya-san. The boy let out a groan. Tell me about it. All right, now that Midoriya and Yaoyorozu have returned, we can carry on with what is planned for today. Aizawa pulled himself out of his sleeping bag and lazily stood before his students. For today's training, we're gonna do things a bit differently than the battle training. In addition to All Might, myself and another staff member will be overseeing you. Today's focus is rescue. You'll be learning how to deal with natural disasters, fires, and other emergency situations like that. Rescue work, eh? This is the real deal. Bonafide hero work that separates the champs from the chumps. I'm so pumped, bro. Kirishima was practically shaking with excitement, most of his peers in a similar state. I finally get to show off my talents in water-based hero situations, Karo. Before the excited chatter could get out of hand, a quick shut the hell up or you and the next 100 generations of your family are going to regret it stare from Aizawa kept the teens in check. If you so choose, you can wear your costume to the training session. The facility that we will be using for the training is an off-campus site, so get yourselves ready and meet out front where the bus will be waiting. That is all. As the class left their seats and began to prepare themselves for the training that was to come, Ida, somehow already in his hero costume, ran back and forth across the room pestering people to get ready. My peers, it is of utmost importance that we waste as little time as possible in readying ourselves. Such is our onus to optimize our efficiency to the fullest in order to get her done, as they say. Giggling at Ida's eccentric behavior, Izuku and Ochako came up to their friend, carrying their hero costume cases. Say, Idaku and I've been meaning to ask, the way you talk, you're like a rich kid, aren't you? Ochako's, delicate phrasing caused Izuku to palm his face and Ida to falter in shock. Recovering himself, Ida gave a weak chuckle and vigorously pushed up his glasses. Well, it isn't something I care to brag about to others, especially not my peers, but yes, I come from a family of heroes. Really? Izuku and Ochako both lit up like kids at Christmas at learning that their classmate belonged to such a family, and they stared at him expectantly. Yes. You see, the Ida family has housed heroes for several generations, utilizing our engine quirks to thwart evil and fight for justice. It runs in our blood. The pair tried their best to stifle their giggling at Ida's unintentional pun, letting out a few squeaks in the process. However, Ida was retelling his family history so passionately, it didn't seem to faze him in the slightest. Are either of you two familiar with the turbo hero, Ingenium? Izuku's mouth fell open and he pointed directly at his blue-haired friend. You mean the crazy popular pro-hero who has 65 sidekicks under his wing at his agency based in Tokyo? Ida-kun, you don't mean… That's right! Ida shouted, chest puffed out proudly. Ingenium is my elder brother. He is an unmatched commander who carries the true values of a hero with the utmost pride and honor. As the second son in my family, I strive to be just like him. The look of sheer admiration in Ida's eyes brought bright smiles to his friends' faces, but just as quickly, he reverted back into his previous mode. But enough reminiscing, we must get ready for the bus, post-haste. As the entirety of Class 1A already had first-hand experience with, UA was not an everyday high school that entailed cliché high school moments most of the time. On the rare occasion that something typical of regular high schools happened, however, it would stand to reason that the students would do their best to enjoy it to the fullest. That is why, much to Aizawa's irritation, the bus was filled with chatter and conversations of every variety, as it traveled down the road towards its destination. One conversation, in particular, seemed to catch the attention of more and more people on the bus as it went on. At the center of it all was none other than Izuku. So, Midoriya-chan. Ajiri began, her stony expression masking the curiosity brimming from her froggy head. I didn't get the chance before to ask, Karo. Your quirk is really amazing, isn't it? Do you mind telling me how it works? If only for a second, Izuku felt his insides drop. He thanked his lucky stars that no one had noticed or picked up on any connection that he may have to the world's #1 hero, but it didn't mean that he wasn't on edge about it from time to time. After that close call with Katsuki, Izuku made extra careful to try and not reveal anything about his relationship with his mentor, and he thought he did a pretty good job so far. After his momentary panic at Ajui's question, he managed to calm himself and remained composed. Is there anything in particular that you want to know about it? He was convinced that he sounded at least mostly nonchalant. Well, from a first glance, most people would think that your quirk is just you being able to transform into animals, but we've all seen that you're capable of a lot more than those animals usually would be. How are you so powerful? It was one of the several questions that Izuku was very much not looking forward to being asked. And being wedged between everyone on the bus, there wasn't anywhere for him to run away. Could he simply take a page out of Mentor's book and just laugh off the line of questioning in hopes that it gets brushed past? Nah, his classmates weren't simpletons. Kaken was suspicious enough as it was, so doing something weird or awkward like that would definitely raise more questions than it would answer. Izuku needed to be creative, cunning, and more than anything else, talking out of his ass like no tomorrow if he was going to diffuse curiosity around his abilities. Well, Ajuri-san, call me Tsu-chan, Karo. Right. Tsu-chan, as you know, quirks are a part of who we are, like it's in our DNA and stuff. And with quirks, my quirk, there's always these things you can do to, The more and more Izuku's incessant and incoherent rambling went on, the more and more nervous he got under the increasingly confused faces from his peers. Quirks, haha, those crazy things, getting stronger and using my quirk, how am I so powerful, huh? That sure is a question. Quiet down and get your things ready. We're here. All eyes turned to Aizawa, who was staring at the group of students lazily from his driver's seat at the front of the bus. Well? What are you waiting for? As everyone around him leapt to their feet and hurried to the front of the bus, Izuku slumped into a puddle of pure stress in his seat. How does All Might bullshit to the entire world so easily every day? When Aizawa said they would be going to one of UA's training facilities, most of Class 1A had expected something along the lines of a gymnasium, or maybe some sort of stadium. Hell, even a couple simulated environments wouldn't be completely crazy for a school like UA to pull off, but not one of the students expected anything like what their sensei had just led them inside of. It was almost quite literally as if they had all set foot into an entirely different world. The training facility consisted of an enormous dome so large that the far end of it couldn't be seen from where they were standing. Circling the inner perimeter of the dome were several different unique areas, all appearing to be simulations of different disasters or crises that heroes may face in any given emergency situation. Paying no mind to the flabbergasted expressions that painted the faces of his students, Aizawa took a few steps forward towards the massive set of stone steps that led down to the disaster areas below, and spun around on his heels back towards the teens. Welcome to the USJ, aka the Unforeseen Simulation Joint. As I said before, here at this facility, you will have access to all that you may need in preparing yourself for future issues you might see in the foreseeable future. This kind of hero work isn't exactly my area of expertise, plus all this talking is a pain in my rear, so to go into a bit of deeper detail on the goal of this training session, one of the other teachers here today will talk to you lot. Just at that moment, a person appeared out of one of the corridors adjacent to the front entrance, waving to all of the students in glee. Hello everyone! I've been waiting for you! The androgynous voice called out, slightly muffled by the blacked-out helmet on their puffy spacesuit. I hope you're all ready for a great training session today. Excited murmuring immediately broke out among the group of students, none more prominent than that of Ochako and Izuku. Whoa, it's the Space Hero 13! Izuku remarked, eyes lit up in awe. Oh my god! 13 is like my favorite hero ever in the whole wide world! Ochako exclaimed. The brunette pumped a fist in the air with a wide grin on her face. The chivalrous hero that saved thousands of people from all kinds of disasters around the globe. This is the best day ever! For a moment, Izuku was quite taken aback at Ochako's otaku-like outburst. Man, so is that what I'm like when I do it? Next to the greenette, Katsuki shuddered in disgust and ground his teeth as he turned away from Ochako. Christ alive, the nerd's fucking dweeb disease is spreading. 13 bowed gracefully at Ochako's praise, but quickly rose back up and clapped their hands together, getting the students' attention. If you'll all follow me for a moment. Leading them to the edge of the large staircase that led down to the various sites, 13 turned on their heel and stuck their hand up to begin counting. A shipwreck, a landslide, a fire, a wind/rainstorm, and many more. These are the areas available to you all today here at the USJ. I created this training facility to help students learn to deal with all types of disasters. Twirling around like a ballerina, 13 excitedly pointed at the students. Now who's ready to get to work and do some saving? In his usual uncaring self, Aizawa nonchalantly interrupted 13's pose as he walked up to them with his hands in his pockets. Hey 13. Wasn't All Might supposed to be here already? Let me guess, he decided to make a TV appearance, and remodel his private jet instead. Actually, 13's hushed tone of seriousness got a quirk eyebrow from Aizawa. This morning, All Might did a little too much hero work and ended up hitting his limit for the day. He's resting back at school in the teacher's lounge. Letting out an almost superhuman length of a sigh, Aizawa pinched the bridge of his nose in annoyance. I swear, that man is the pinnacle of irresponsibility. The world's #1 hero, not even able to save himself for his duties. Glancing over at his expectant students, he internally shrugged. I guess things shouldn't be too much for the two of us to handle. As long as nothing too crazy happens. Still, how hectic could things have been for All Might to use 3 hours worth of strength this morning? Earlier that morning, if there was one thing that people absolutely hated with a fiery passion, and if able, would obliterate in its entirety from existence, it would undoubtedly be the morning commute. What redeeming qualities does this dastardly daily trip have? None whatsoever. The sea of bodies moving to and from throughout the streets and subway stations. The ungodly hour at which the trips are being taken. The destination themselves of where these poor souls are going off to. Yuck. Now for some, morning commutes aren't all that bad. Like if, let's say, a person had a unique means of transportation that allowed them to completely avoid the human traffic and general bleakness that accompanied it. And for the sake of argument, let's also say that this mode of transportation was much faster than taking the subway. So in addition to being able to enjoy the luxury of personal space, it also allowed for a much shorter trip. To that one might say, there's no way in hell that someone is capable of that. That's ridiculous. I am soaring through the air like a hero on my way to school. Well, when you live in a world full of superhuman heroes, especially a world that includes someone like All Might, the idea of ridiculous tends to be thrown out the window. If there was one thing All Might had learned in his many years of saving the day from every threat to world peace imaginable, it was that life, especially the little things, should never be taken for granted for even a single second. This was why the #1 hero could be seen leaping across the rooftops in the direction of Yue, feeling the crisp morning air and the encroaching rays of sunlight on his skin. All Might was well aware of his injury, and the strain it caused on his body and ability to use OFA. Although, he found it important to use it in times like these as sort of calisthenics in order to maintain his edge and keep from getting rusty. Plus, he wasn't about to sit on the subway and deal with that monsoon of people. He was All Might for All Might's sake. Besides, it wasn't like anything major was going to happen that the other pros on morning patrols couldn't handle without him stepping in. What were the odds of that hap? Look out! That guy is on a rampage, and none of the pros here can stop him. Okay. Bad luck there. All Might skidded to a halt and peered over the roof of the apartment building he was standing on top of to see a large pink man thing running down the street and causing mayhem as he went. The blonde hero sighed to himself as he saw a pack of pros chasing after him, followed by several police cars as well. Looks like duty calls. This shouldn't be too bad. I could still make it in time to get a snack before homeroom starts. Taking a few moments to limber up, All Might sprang off of the roof and rocketed down towards the street below. Evil awaited. Stay back, you assholes! I swear I'll kill these shrimps if you come any closer. These fucks are gonna feel the wrath of Trapezius headgear. The once busy street was now devoid of all people, save the pink villain, his hostages, and several pro-heroes desperately trying to stop him. The massive villain, his muscular arms slowly tightening around the terrified civilians in his grip, scowled at the heroes that were slowly edging towards him. Stay the fuck back! Using his free arm, he picked up a small car parked on the curb and wildly chucked it in the direction of his foes. At the head of the pack of heroes was Takayama Yu, aka Empty Lady. She was very, very, very frustrated at the entire morning that she was having up until this point. First, she had to see that old bitch Midnight on TV doing some bullshit talk show. You could practically smell the desperation coming off her sagahor body as she pandered to the horny male audiences that kept her mediocre hero career afloat. If that wasn't bad enough, she now had to chase around the giant pink eraser in the leather biker outfit who was hellbent on being an asshole to the general public for shits and giggles. And just for an added cherry on top of the horse shit sundae, this oversized wad of gum just had to lead her down a street that was too narrow for her to use her quirk. The blonde novice hero really regretted not fine-tuning her quirk more at UA because she could have sworn this happened every other goddamn day. Stupid small Japanese streets. This asshole is getting on my last nerve. You yelled. Kamui! You want to handle him? Said Wooden Hero scoffed in derision at her. Are you sure you aren't keen on poaching this villain capture to yourself again? You rolled her eyes and sassily put a hand on her hip. How many times are you going to bring that up? Don't be such a stick in the mud. You were already on the up and up. So why not share some of the glory for a fresh-on-the-scene hero like Lil Old Me? She smirked at the irked expression he took on, amused by how easy it was to get under his skin. Or bark, whatever. He's made of wood, okay. Anyway, you think you can get the drop on him, or what? I might have an opening, but I really don't think it's a good idea, what with the hostages he has in such a position. Death Arms just got done talking to the hostage unit, and they should be having a sniper set up any minute now. Hey Twiggy! Are you and the hooker with the horns done talking? Get the fuck away before I squish these people to fucking dust. Kamui palmed his face at the villain's word, because in 3, 2, 1. What the fuck did you call me, you glorified Kirby-looking motherfucker? I'll kill you! It took every fiber in Yu's being to not just say fuck it and use her quirk to stomp this son of a bitch like the insect he was, partly because she would be risking the innocent lives at stake, but mostly because she really didn't have the money to pay for another city block that had to be repaired because of her. Thankfully, before you could do anything rash, several wooden tendrils wrapped her arms and waist to keep her in place. "MT lady! Calm down! Jesus, this woman was strong." One would think Kamui would be able to hold MT lady back when she wasn't using her quirk, but somehow his dense wooden limbs were somehow losing to her in her state of anger. "You! Control yourself! You're jeopardizing the safety of those civilians!" Those words managed to reach the fuming woman, and she stopped trying to pull out of Kamui's grasp. Thoroughly fed up with the annoying antics of the heroes before him, Trapezius grit his teeth in anger. He had had it. "That's it, you fucks! I'm tired of this! You had your chance to back off, and now these people are gonna get it." Just as he was about to squeeze the life out of the poor people in his grip, a large shadow above him made him stop in confusion. All eyes went upwards at the large mass hurtling towards them at breakneck speed. But no one could clearly make out who or what it was due to the glare of the sun directly behind it. "Have no fear! For I am here!" The voice was unmistakable. That booming yell that was the bane of all evildoers and the savior to all supporters of peace and justice. MT Lady and Kamui's spirits lifted as they say the idol of all heroes land on the ground with an epic slam directly before the villain that had been causing so much trouble. Slowly rising from the cloud of dust that had been created via his impact onto the street, All Might's shining blue eyes twinkled before he zoomed forward at breakneck speed. The large pink villain had barely a moment to blink before he suddenly found himself empty-handed. Whipping his trapezoidal head around, he saw the symbol of peace holding all of the hostages safely in his arms, giving him a smile that sent shivers down his spine. "Now that these innocents are out of harm's way, fiend! Prepare yourself, here you are!" MT Lady and Kamui Woods both graciously accepted the bottles of water from All Might, fresh off of their preliminary report of the villain incident to the police department. It was an impressive sight to see the world's #1 hero fighting evil from so close, and the pair of young adults could still feel the occasional goosebump as they watched the giant of a man talking amicably with one of the detectives that had just arrived on the scene. Sighing deeply in exhaustion, you leaned back on the hood of the squad car. "You don't know how glad I am for this whole thing to be dealt with. God, I could use a massage. What do you say we go to the onsen this weekend?" Confused by the lack of response, you lazily raised her head only to see the head of her hero agency staring off into space, elbows firmly rested on his knees. "Kamui, what's the matter?" After a few moments of silence, he sat up straight and sighed. You couldn't see his eyes because he was facing forward, and his mask made it otherwise impossible to read his expression. "Shinji? Shinkun? Are you okay?" You put a comforting hand on his shoulder, only to face fault when he turned to her with comical tears spilling down his wooden mask. "All Might is so cool," he loudly whispered, gripping onto MT Lady's shoulders as if his life depended on it. "I never saw him fight in person before." The blonde stared at him with a deadpan expression, at a loss for words. "Are you for real right now?" Instantly reverting back to his usual demeanor, Kamui tilted his head in confusion. "How do you mean?" Yu's brow trembled furiously, and she shoved Kamui off of her by his mask before storming off. "You idiot!" As Kamui chased after a fuming MT Lady trying to plead his case with her, All Might watched them with a bemused expression. "Ah, to be young and in love. Now what was it that you were saying again, Tsukachi-kun?" The man next to him, a tall man dressed in a beige trench coat over his suit, smiled as he pulled a pack of cigarettes out of his coat's breast pocket. "I just wanted to see how you were doing, Toshi. There's been a ton of talk at the precinct about all the work you've been doing lately." He paused to pull a single cigarette out of the pack, lighting it in his mouth. Tsukachi took a long drag, slowly blowing the smoke out of his nostrils. "You sure it's all right for you to be fighting crime so much? What with your condition and all?" Of course. I've never felt better, my dear friend." All Might puffed his chest out proudly. "I could do this all day." He did his best to seem convincing, but the look that Tsukachi was giving him made him more nervous by the second. Beads of sweat began rolling down his face as his friend slowly began pulling one of his gloves off of his hands. I swear alright. Just as Tsukachi was about to make contact on All Might with his bare hands, the symbol of peace gave in, sighing heavily as his shoulders slumped over. There's no need to go that far, Tsukachi-kun, I get it. I know the kind of state I'm in will only get worse the more I push the envelope. But what else am I supposed to do? I can't just possess what I do and just not do anything with it. It would spit on those who came before me. It would shame the legacy that my master built for me. Yeah, I've heard it all before. Taking another drag from his cigarette, Tsukachi screwed his eyes shut and thought. Tell you what, I won't try and stop you from doing all this stuff, because that would be like me trying to stop you from being you. But in return, tell me how things are from time to time, yeah? This lame detective wouldn't mind hearing the ordeals of the great, and oh so magnificent All Might. I think I can manage that. Both men's attention quickly turned to the fact that All Might had begun steaming slightly. Aha, I suppose that is my cue. Farewell. As Tsukachi watched the symbol of peace leap off towards Yue, he couldn't shake the worry in the back of his mind. I sure hope you can manage, Toshi. Present time. Alright, now that you've all been briefed in detail about exactly what is at your disposal here today, we should be ready to go. Time is of the essence, so let's not waste any more time standing around. Aizawa did his best to not groan at the excitement brimming off of his students. It showed at least that they were going to work hard, he supposed. 13? Of course. Just let me get things going here. We have a state-of-the-art AI system here designed to track your activity and tell us how you're doing. Just let me get it up and running. Walking over to a large lever on the wall, 13 flipped it with gusto. Behold, after a few seconds of nothing happening, they stared curiously at the lever. Odd. Flipping it back and forth several times, 13 grew increasingly frustrated, grunting in annoyance as they slammed the lever up and down. Turn. On. You. Dumb. Machine. On the last flip, mechanical whirring resonated throughout the dome, causing the group to let out a collective sigh of relief. Okay, now that that's over. Aizawa was abruptly cut off by a sharp crackle of electricity before all of the lights in the USJ shut off. He turned with a sharp gaze towards 13, who seemed just as alarmed as he was. Cursing to himself, he looked towards the center of the room, where the air seemed to be warping ominously. Suddenly, a large mass of darkness appeared out of thin air, expanding rapidly to the as a sharp pair of glowing yellow eyes formed near its peak. As the black matter continued to expand across the center square of the USJ, the silhouettes of bodies began coming into view, populating the once empty space by the dozens. What's going on? Is this part of the training? No! Aizawa's yell caught the class off guard as the pro-hero made a mad dash for the top of the stairs leading down to the square. This isn't part of the training. Those are real villains. 20 pairs of eyes widened in shock. What was supposed to be a fulfilling educational experience suddenly turned into a catastrophe. Izuku couldn't help his body from shaking, his throat suddenly drier than it had ever been in his young life. The anxiety that had instantly built up within himself and his classmates was palpable, and no one could find the will to utter a word in response to their teacher's revelation. At the center of the vortex emerged a lanky, hunched-over figure dressed in all black. The man raised his head, his piercing red eyes shining past the severed hand covering his face, one of the several severed hands attached to his person. Directly beside him was a massive humanoid being with some sort of malformed bird-like face. The beast tilted its head to and fro, enormous muscles rippling as it moved. I see the pro-heroes erase her head in 13, but according to the intel that we obtained, All Might was supposed to be at this session as well. The ominous voice of the dark mist spoke, glowing yellow eyes appearing as the mist took on the silhouette of a head. Looking to either side of himself at the literal mob of villains that had begun trudging out of the dark mist, the lanky man grunted to himself. Hey, you're right. I even went to the trouble of bringing all these friends who so very badly wanted to meet him. Well, I bet if we kill some of those kids up there he might show. Let's have a little fun, shall we? Game start. This was bad. This was very, very bad. This had to be the worst thing that could have happened today. Trying to manage a bunch of rambunctious teenagers was one thing. That was a task in of itself. So why? Why the hell did this group of villains just have to show up and make things into an actual problem? Taking no more than a split second to curse his luck, Aizawa sprang into action, goggles already on his face and scarf already beginning to unravel. 13. Protect the students. I'll deal with the riff-raff down there. But sensei, there's way too many villains down there for you to handle. Your corps can't work on more than one person at a time, so it's ideal for one-on-one combat or ambushes. How are you going to take on that mob all by yourself? Please, Midoriya. No real hero is a one-trick pony. Stay here with your classmates where it's safe. With that, the scraggy pro leapt down towards the square, making a straight shot for the nearest group of villains. Not letting Aizawa be the only pro-hero in action, 13 began corralling the students to ensure that everyone was together and accounted for. You heard Eraser, let's move! But before the pro could move their students to the exit, the same mass of black fog that had brought the group of villains to the USJ in the first place suddenly appeared before them. I'm afraid that cannot be allowed. You see, aside from being responsible for transporting all of those unsavory characters to this facility, I have been tasked with ensuring that no one, UA student or pro-hero, is to exit the premises. I'm sure you understand. Slowly backpedaling along with their students, 13 narrowed their eyes. What exactly is it that you're trying to achieve here? Now, Space Hero. I do believe that you are in no position to be the one asking questions under these circumstances. What I would like to know is why you all seem to be short one symbol of peace here today. We, the League of Villains, went through all this just for him, and he fails to even be here? Now how in the world are we supposed to put an end to All Might and kill him without him being here, His black mist slowly increased in size, expanding across the class direct path to the exit. Well, I suppose in the end it doesn't particularly matter. I still have a duty to fulfill. Before 13 could take action, Bakugo and Kirishima decided to take matters into their own hands, launching a simultaneous attack at the mist villain. As the smoke from Bakugo's explosion began to dissipate, the pair of boys had on confident smirks. If you thought that we were just gonna stand there and let you monologue, then you got another thing, Kirishima's quip died in his throat when the mist man reappeared, completely unscathed. You truly are heroes in the making, aren't you? The man's head reformed, a large metal brace now floating on his body. But be careful, little boys and girls, or someone might get hurt. Bakugo, Kirishima. Get back now! 13's warning came a moment too late, as darkness slowly began to encroach on them. Prepare yourselves, children. I'll scatter you across this facility to meet all of the fine companions we've brought here today, and your doom! The dark mist then shot out at breakneck speed, enveloping the teens in the blink of an eye. Being at the edge of the group, several of the students were able to avoid being swallowed up by the black mist, but as the darkness receded, it was revealed that more than half of the class had gone missing. Now then, the villain narrowed his glowing yellow eyes. I suppose that should suffice for the moment. What say you, 13? Back at UA. No answer again. All Might had been trying to call Aizawa or 13 at the USJ for over 10 minutes, and he was starting to get worried. Then again, they were teaching. The symbol of peace found himself quite angsty, partly from the fact that he had no way to communicate with his colleagues, but mostly because he was stuck on the couch in the teacher's lounge because he'd overused OFA again. I can't keep neglecting my duty as a teacher to spend my morning commutes being heroic. Come on, Tashinori! Amateur hour! He let out a deep sigh. Maybe I can show up at the end and give them some kind of inspiring speech about justice or something. Try and squeeze a good 10 more minutes out of my hero form. Finding a moment of energy, Yagi leapt to his feet, suddenly enlarging to his muscular form, letting out a hearty laugh that just as quickly turned into a bloody cough as he redeflated. As the blonde hero was knee-deep in sulking, the door slid open to reveal Principal Nizu, smiling warmly at him with his hand behind his back. Well, hello there, All Might. Principal Nizu! Fancy meeting you here. The mouse-slash-dog-slash-bear thing strolled into the room and calmly slid the door shut behind him. You really haven't changed a bit after all these years, have you? I know it can't be helped that you want to jump to the rescue any chance you get, but don't you think you need to be a bit more mindful of when and where you're using the remains of your power? Pacing back and forth, Nizu finally stopped and sat down on the couch opposite of All Might. Now, I think you should stay here and rest a bit longer. Why don't you have some tea and you can listen to my patented plus ultra-long lesson about ethical quirk use in and its impact on the postage stamp. You really haven't changed much either, sir. Back at the USJ, shipwreck zone. Oh, Cammy, I'm gonna die a virgin! Mineta had really just about had it. UA was supposed to be his time. He was supposed to be having the time of his life. He was finally free from his parents to do as he wanted and taste all the flavors of female that UA had to offer. But no. Instead of his perfect high school experience that was totally plausible and could have definitely happened, he got shafted at every corner. First, he gets put in the same room in the prudest of all prudes. The stickler of all sticklers. Ida put up a damn family-safe search engine software on his computer for All Might's sake. Then, that stupid lucky bastard Midoriya gets to witness the mother of all holy grails that was Yayorose's Yaoyurubis. And now they were being attacked by villains, not robots. Not training dummies, real. Fucking villains. What the hell was he supposed to do? Finally landing in the water after being spat out of the portal that had sucked him up, Mineta opened his eyes to see a villain zooming towards him. Letting out a gurgling scream, the boy frantically flailed his tiny limbs around, hoping to get at least an inch away from the shark man quickly advancing on him. Sorry, little guy, it's nothing personal, but your fish food. Just as the villain opened his jaw, primed to take a bite out of Mineta with his razor-sharp teeth, a pressure wave rippled through the water, hitting the villain head-on and sending him reeling backwards. Using this window, Mineta swam as fast as he could to the surface, gasping for air as his head had breached. "Mineta, grab on!" He looked up to see Kaminari dangling from the edge of the ship, holding the rope to a life preserver that had landed in the water next to him. After being pulled onto the deck of the ship, Mineta laid sprawled on his back for a few minutes, panting and coughing up water. Thanks, Kaminari. I thought I was a goner." "Don't just thank me, dude. Jiro was the one who took out that shark villain," said girl merely shrugged, twirling one of her jacks with her finger. "Whatever. Wouldn't be much of a hero if I didn't do it, even if he is a little creep." Mineta sat up slowly, the last of the liquid now out of his lungs. "Oh, it was just her. Man, this day just keeps getting worse and worse. Didn't even get CPR from one of the hot girls in class." He quickly found himself on the receiving end of a barrage of sound waves courtesy of Jiro's jacks. "You little twerp, I should have let that shark take a bite out of your ass." Jiro spat out, giving the sobbing teen a kick for good measure. "Now enough messing around. What the hell are we gonna do about all those guys in the water?" Peering over the railing, Jiro saw that all of the villains in the shipwreck zone had surrounded them. "Any ideas? Now, Mineta, aren't you being a little too harsh? Sure, Jiro isn't as much as the other girls in our class, but give her some credit. Plus, between you and me, I don't think beggars can't be choosers in your case." Jiro could have sworn she had blown a blood vessel in her forehead. Were those two idiots really having a conversation like that at a time like this? She was sure as hell getting them all out of there alive, because she was gonna be the one to murder them. Seriously, though. What the hell are we gonna do? We're trapped on this boat with those guys all around us. Jiro bit on her thumb in worry. I can't make sound waves strong enough to do any real damage to those villains without wrecking the boat and royally screwing us. Man, I wish someone strong was here like Todoroki or Midoriya. Hell, I'd even take Bakugo's yelling if it meant we could get out of here somehow. Hey! Those three aren't the only ones who can do stuff, you know. We got into UA too, right? We are supposed to become heroes too. Okay, so what's your plan then, Kaminari? Well, you know, I honestly didn't think I would get this far. Ugh! Ruffling his hair in frustration, Kaminari's face suddenly lit up. I got it! Okay, here's the plan. So how long are we gonna wait for those damn kids up on that boat? Can't we just kill them already? Many of the villains treading in the water were getting tired of waiting for their prey, and in the villain world, boredom usually turned to bloodshed very quickly. The shark man suddenly surfaced among them, still shaking off Jiro's attack. Those damn brats! I'm gonna enjoy eating them! Let's go! That was good enough for them. The villains all made a beeline for the boat, where certain doom awaited the UA students. At least, that's what they thought. Before they could reach the side of the ship, multiple sound waves began firing at them from either side, forcing all the villains to begin moving towards each other. Mineta, now! Said diminutive teen leapt onto the railing, and began throwing his purple balls at the group of villains at a rapid-fire rate. Take this. And that. And this and that and this and that. Aha! Got you guys! Mineta puffed out his chest in triumph as the group of villains now found themselves stuck together in a big clump thanks to the stickiness of his pop-off quirk. Nice, you guys! Now it's my turn! Kaminari yelled as he ran out from the inside of the ship, carrying a large spool in his arms. Good thing UA stocked this ship with real boat stuff. Can't go wrong with metal fishing line. Rearing back, the blonde chucked the spool with all his strength, smiling to himself as he heard it impact with one of the villains' heads. Grabbing the end of the line, Kaminari activated his quirk, sending a jolt of electricity to the blob of bad guys down below. Time to fry these fish, Mountain Zone. Izuku emerged from the black mist portal, plopping unceremoniously onto the hard ground. Ouch, that villain totally caught me off guard. Rising to his feet and dusting himself off, Izuku noticed that two of his classmates had been transported with him. Tsuyu and Momo laid on the ground in a tangled heap at his feet, both very clearly dazed and uncomfortable. After helping the pair to their feet, Izuku took a look around at their surroundings, not seeing much besides the expanse of mountain landscape all around them. It looks like we three are the only ones that got sent to this area. That Miss Villain sure was quick in splitting us all up. They planned according to our schedule perfectly so that they could find the best moment to strike. Momo chimed in. They must have obtained the school files from the grounds on that day when the alarm had gone off. That Miss Villain said that they were here to kill All Might, didn't he? If they went to all this trouble, wouldn't that mean that they have some kind of plan and think they are actually able to pull it off? Kero. Ajui's words struck a chord with both of her classmates, Izuku and Momo sharing worried looks. Izuku quickly found himself deep in his own thoughts. almost instantly tuning out the words of the other two with him. She's right. There's no way they would even try something like this if they weren't sure that they could kill All Might. What exactly are they trying to achieve here by doing that? TCH. Izuku ground his teeth in frustration before taking a deep intake of breath. It doesn't matter what their goal is. All Might isn't here right now to save the day. It's up to us to face this evil. If they think they can beat him, we have to stop them before they have the chance. Worst of all, we also have ourselves to worry about. With all of these villains here at USJ, it'll be quite a fight on our hands. What do you think we should do, Midoriya-san? Before he could answer, Izuku's keen senses caused him to snap his head all around, startling the two girls with him. Before they knew it, dozens of villains had moved on them, effectively cornering the three heroes in training on the far end of the zone. Edging closer together to try and eliminate any possibility of being blindsided, the three heroes took defensive stances. Well. Aren't you three just precious? The villain that seemed to be the leader of the mob taunted. You really think you can take all of us by yourselves? You're just a bunch of brats. This'll be the easiest pickings of my damn life. Out of nowhere, a bright golden light shone off in the distance, followed by a few stray bolts of electricity shooting off into the sky and many loud cries of pain. Noticing this, Izuku dropped his head with a wry chuckle, eyes shadowed by the messy tufts of green hair hanging over his forehead. Huh? What's so funny, you little shit? Our other classmates just amaze me, that's all. Izuku raised his head, his emerald pupils shining like stars as he slowly began channeling OFA throughout his body. None of us knows what's going on, but that won't stop you guys, will it? We have to take matters into our own hands and be the heroes we're training to be. His fierce gaze managed to freeze some of the villains in their tracks, none of them expecting a 15-year-old to be able to emanate that kind of power just from a look. Yayorosa-san, ASU, Tsu-chan, are you two ready for this? Both girls nodded in determination, their bravery and confidence elevated exponentially thanks to their green-haired class rep. Izuku's smile widened. Well then, let's go! Pulling the end of her steel bow staff out of the sternum of one of the villains before her, Momo sighed wearily. This is growing quite tedious. They won't stop coming. Overhead, Tsuyu acrobatically twirled through the air, lashing out with her tongue to strike villains left and right. She landed on all fours next to Momo, her amphibious appendage snapping back into her mouth. I don't think the problem is that they're too large in number, it's more that we aren't really doing all that much damage to them. Well, the two of us anyway. Karo, the frog girl's comment caused both girls to look towards the third member of their team at the moment, plowing through villains like it was hardly any work whatsoever. Both had seen Izuku in combat before, Momo having experienced it firsthand. He looked like he was right at home, shape-shifting into different animals as he zoomed around the area with no hesitation in taking opponents head-on. But there was just an unmistakable aura that the green-haired teen gave off that was both extremely reassuring and extremely worrying at the same time. It was extremely reassuring because his combat skills were as clear as day to anyone watching him. His masterful movements and efficient strikes, combined with his versatile quirk and pure strength, allowed him to take down enemies one after another. It was extremely worrying at the same time, however, imagining what it would be like to have to fight Izuku as his enemy. From what Momo and Tsuyu had gathered from the current fight, it would be an absolute nightmare. They almost felt bad about the beating that their class rep was laying down. Come on, guys! It's just one kid. If we take him out, we can have fun with those chicks till the boss needs us. Almost. Villains were villains, after all. And especially scummy ones like these were asking to be put in their place. Izuku slid to a stop in front of Momo and Tsuyu, his red boots kicking up a thin trail of dust around his person. The last few green sparks shot off his body as he deactivated his inherited quirk, and he turned to survey what was left of the group of villains that they were fighting. Despite the fact that dozens of villains were on the ground and out cold thanks to the young hero's efforts, a large number still remained. A sudden cry of agony rang out throughout the building, causing all three UA students to grimace. That sounded a lot like Aizawa-sensei. We need to end this. Now, well, how exactly do we do that, Midoriya-chan? Midoriya's expression had done a complete flip. His smile had completely faded. The playfulness had completely vanished from his eyes and was replaced by a grave urgency. Leave it to me. His tone left no room for argument. Despite wanting to be of some help themselves, Momo and Tsuyu found themselves instinctively nodding at the direction, both taking several steps backwards in fear of collateral damage. Isn't that adorable, boys? Little man over here wants to swing his dick around and take us all by himself. The taunting villain at the head of the pack wore a dark red open trench coat, reaching into it and pulling out a large meat cleaver. You must think you're some real hot shit, but these guys have been nothing but street goons and petty thugs. They call me the Butcher. I'm on Japan's most wanted list. It's time for you to learn your place, runt. The man's words seemed to reach the rest of his comrades, who had malicious grins on their faces as they edged forward towards Izuku. 15 of them versus 1 hardly seemed like a fair fight, but they were villains. Playing dirty came with the territory. Said teen hadn't dignified the villain's words with a response, merely striding forward at a snail's pace with his eyes shadowed by his hair. With each step he took, the integrity of the ground beneath his feet began to compromise. His body began crackling with green electricity, and the orange tribal-like markings on his skin that had become synonymous with OFA became visible along the open areas of his costume. Izuku's expression was all business, and before any villains had the chance to trash-talk him anymore, he vanished. A few strands of green light and a faint cloud of dust were the only indicators that he was there in the first place. What? Where'd he g? In an instant, 6 of the 15 villains dropped to the ground, unconscious. The so-called butcher had to keep his eyes from bugging out of his head. Izuku was right back in his original position as if he hadn't budged an inch. How is that kid so damn fast? I didn't even see him move. What the hell is Goi? Before he could finish his astonished thought, several more thuds rang out, causing him to whip his head around and see the rest of his comrades hit the ground. Turning back, Izuku once again stood in the same spot, his piercing gaze now directed right at him. For once in a long time, the wanted criminal felt a deep knot forming in his stomach. His mouth was suddenly dry and he found it impossible to swallow whatever lump had just formed in his throat. Fear. He was genuinely afraid of this teenage boy. He had faced his fair share of formidable foes in his days of crime, but it was hard to recall the last time he was ever this nervous. The teen wasn't even using his quirk. Not once did he see him turn into whatever animals he was able to transform into. Clammy hands shakily lifting his cleaver, criminal instincts and adrenaline took over, ready to strike at the green-haired teen whether it seemed like a good idea or not. The butcher stood frozen, shock and awe locking his limbs in place. He had barely blinked in time to see the young hero upon him, fist cocked back and a stony expression on his face. It truly was baffling how an event that must have taken place in less than a second seemed to move in super slow motion. He could very clearly see the hit coming his way, but there was nothing he could physically do to stop it. Quite honestly, it made it all the more terrifying. Crack. Momo had to suppress a wince as the villain was sent rocketing across the mountain zone. Sure, it was a villain, and she had just taken out her fair share, but that punch was just so brutal. Perhaps it was because Midoriya's mood had shifted so drastically that his actions seemed to carry much more weight. She shook her head, trying to clear it of distracting thoughts. There was no time for any of that. Her classmates and teachers needed their help. Izuku quickly transformed into a dark green thoroughbred, waiting for Momo and Tsuyu to mount him before galloping off to where their sensei was. Collapse zone? Eat shit, fuckers! The pair of villains took the full brunt of an explosion courtesy of Katsuki's quirk, sending them flying back into the wall on the opposite side of the worn-down room. Panting slightly as he regrouped with Kirishima, who was just getting done striking down a villain of his own, the ash blonde took a quick look around. I think that's the last of them. Fucking weaklings. Alright, let's go find the rest of our class. If we're both still in the USJ, I doubt they would have sent the others somewhere else. He gave his hand a solemn stare as he clenched his fist. And not everyone can fight back as well as we can. We gotta make sure they're okay. We got in 13th's way and screwed things up in the first place. You go back to the others if you want, but I got a score to settle with that warpy asshole first. Katsuki said through gritted teeth. No one fucked with him like that and got away with it. Why did you not notice that our physical attacks didn't do anything the first time? Come on, man! Don't be an idiot. Shut up! Katsuki's outburst scared Aijiro, causing the redhead to take a step back. That guy is their way in and out of this place, don't you get it? If I take away their escape route, those villains will be stuck here. While the two teens were yelling at each other, one villain that had seemingly eluded their attention slowly crawled down from the ceiling where he had been clinging to an exposed copper pipe overhead. With a quirk tailor-made for stealth and assassinations, the chameleon man stalked his prey, pulling out a knife to end the heroes in training. Hope you had fun chatting, too bad you left yourself wide open. The man squealed as he was suddenly grabbed by the top of the head by Bakugo. Straining under the teen's insane grip strength, the villain flailed about like a fish out of water trying to free himself from the vice. Hey, we can talk about this, kid. I was just playing around, boom. Anyway, Katsuki began, holding up the now charred and unconscious villain. If the rest of the villains are weak like these guys, we don't have to worry about the rest of our class. At least a couple of them aren't total idiots. Whoa, what reaction time? Kirishima had noticed the guy as well, sure, but Bakugo reacted in an instant. Hey, wait, since when are you so level-headed? You're usually yelling and swearing your head off. I'm always level-headed, you spiky-haired reject. Yeah, that's more like it. Also, the redhead gave his classmate a smirk. Was that a compliment to your peers I heard before? Receiving only a death glare in reply, Kirishima couldn't help but laugh. He knew Bakugo was a good guy, deep down. He would have teased him a bit more, but there were more pressing matters at hand. Ida's world was spinning. He found his breast shallow, his ears ringing, and a deep sense of dread forming in the pit of his stomach. After witnessing 13 go down at the hands of the Mist villain, he stood petrified with the remainder of his classmates that had avoided being transported away. Well, now that the pro is taken care of, there shouldn't be too much trouble with you children. What do you say? The villain turned to the students, golden eyes glowing ominously. Looking at the partially disintegrated form of their teacher on the ground seemed to snap a few of the students out of their fear-induced stupor. Sato grit his teeth and slowly stepped forward. Ida, you need to go. Get out of here, hurry, but Sato-kun. I can't just leave you guys here. Ida felt himself trembling all over. His body refused to obey him and do anything but stand in place. Come on, Ida. You're the only one fast enough to go and get help in time. Ciro threw in. Screwing his eyes shut, the blue-haired teen tried his best to think rationally over the deafening pounding of his heart beating. He glanced over at 13 being taken care of by Uraraka and Ishido, then over in the direction of the center plaza where Aizawa was fighting alone. Our teachers are laying their lives on the line for us. Can I call myself a real hero if I don't use the quirk I was given to save people? Ida's older brother flashed through his mind. Ida Tensei was a true hero who did his best to help people whenever he could. He was the light at the end of the tunnel that Tenya hoped to reach one day. Would he have even hesitated for a second like his little brother was doing right now? Engine! Letting out a frustrated cry, Ida launched forward. He blew by the Mist villain, headed straight for the exit with all his might. Ho! A lone sheep thinking it can escape from the wolves? I commend your effort, but this I cannot allow. The villain vanished into thin air and suddenly appeared right in the middle of Ida's path to the door. Darn! Turning his feet to try and skid to a stop, Ida dug his heels down as hard as he could to avoid being caught in a portal. If other heroes catch wind of this and come to help, it will make our plans to end All Might a bit more complicated. I'm sure you understand. Ida's eyes widened as the darkness in front of him grew closer and closer. There was no way for him to stop in time to avoid running right into the villain. He had failed. He had failed his classmates, his teachers, his family's legacy. If only he had been better. If only— What the? Unhand me this instant, you ruffian! Having caught the Mist villain off guard, Shoji tackled and wrapped his large frame over him, effectively trapping him in place. Ida, run! As the masked teen struggled to hold the mass of darkness down, Ida didn't waste a second of his classmates' efforts and pushed his quirk to the limit. He burst through the front entrance and was out of sight moments later. This is quite the conundrum I have on my hands, the villain muttered to himself. Now, if you'll release me. He rapidly expanded his form, sending Shoji flying off of him. His impact was softened by Sato being able to intercept him, but the force of his flight was great enough to send both boys tumbling across the ground. I must notify Shigaraki at once. Pain, overwhelming, immeasurable pain. It took just about all of his willpower and strength to even remain conscious. As a seasoned pro hero, Aizawa was no stranger to taking hits. Even the best and strongest heroes the world had to offer took their lumps from time to time. Case in point, All Might. But this was almost unfathomable. Things had been going well, considering the circumstances. As Shota had expected, all of the villains were nothing but scrubs who couldn't hold a candle to any competent hero with a few licks of field expertise. Save for a couple, anyway. The villain's apparent leader stood by and just watched for the most part. At first, Shota thought he was merely one of those bosses who like to let their cronies do the work. But once he entered the fray, it was clear to the Erasure hero that he was biding his time to find the right moment to strike. Luckily, he had only received injuries to his elbow from whatever disintegrating quirk that villain had. But that was the least of his problems. If that guy wouldn't have been enough of an annoyance to deal with on his own, then the horrific abomination that currently had Aizawa pinned helplessly to the ground was the icing on top of the shit cake. In an instant, he had been overwhelmed by the monster's brute strength. Now, with his right arm practically in pieces and his lower body held down by the black-skinned Goliath, Aizawa saw himself out of options. So, you can erase quirks? The villain's raspy voice was almost inaudible to the pro thanks to the agonizing pain he was experiencing. That's pretty annoying, but it's nothing impressive. His voice grew amused and he began chuckling out his words. When faced with real destructive power, you might as well be a quirkless little boy. In a last-ditch effort, Aizawa snapped his head around and activated his quirk on the beast above him, only to have his other arm smashed into the ground by its gargantuan hand. I know I erased his quirk, but he still broke my bones like toothpicks. He must be this strong naturally. I know what you're thinking. How could he be so strong even though you just erased his quirk? Having his head forcefully lifted to look in the eyes of the villain before him, Aizawa saw the glee on his hidden face. That's the best part, Eraserhead. You see, Noma here was created specifically to take out that damned symbol of peace, so from a strength perspective, he's gotta be on the same level as All Might. He turned his attention to the mist villain appearing beside him. What is it, Kurojiri? Shigaraki Tamura. I managed to incapacitate 13, but one of the students escaped and is presumably headed back to UA to call for help as we speak. Huh! Shigaraki's breathing grew heavy as he began violently scratching at the sides of his neck. You imbecile! After a few moments, he froze. Slowly lowering his hands, he turned to the warping villain. We can't win if dozens of pros show up here. It's game over for us. Let's go home, but first. Turning his head towards the rapid clicking of hooves heading in his direction, his blood eyes took on a sinister sparkle. How about we hurt All Might's pride and kill a couple of his students first? Midoriya, Yayorozu, and Azuri weren't really sure what they expected to see when they had rushed in the direction of their sensei's anguish yells. But whatever they could have imagined didn't come close to the sickening sight they had come to see. Izuku had brought them to the plaza as fast as he could, but they were too late to back up Eraserhead. Sensei. Momo had to suppress a gag looking at the broken form of her capable teacher. Next to her, her classmates in a similar state, deathly pale and trembling slightly. Well, what do we have here? Shigaraki turned to the trio and held his arms out. Right on time, kids! I was just telling your teacher here that we gotta adjust the game settings a little bit. Thanks to one of your classmates, backup is arriving soon, so before we head out, I thought it would be nice to leave a little parting gift for All Might. Your corpses should do great. Shigaraki lunged at them with bewildering speed, and in an instant, his palms were mere inches away from the faces of Momo and Tsuyu. The poor girls barely had time to blink as their lives flashed before their eyes. To Izuku, the entire thing was happening in slow motion, yet he couldn't will himself to move. However, the fatalities never came. Even at this point, you get in my way. Turning around to see Aizawa glaring at him, hair afloat to signal that he was using his quirk, Shigaraki let out a dry chuckle. That's what makes you so cool, hero! The brief moment of triumph was dashed as quickly as it came when the Nomas slammed Aizawa's face into the ground, shattering the clay tiles beneath them as it did. Somehow regaining the cognitive ability to move, Izuku frantically sprang into action. Get away from them! Acting on sheer instinct, he powered up his arm with as much OFA as he could muster and swung his fist at Shigaraki. The shockwave from the blow sent the two girls sliding backwards, and it whipped up the debris around them to form a large cloud of dust. As it settled, Izuku's eyes widened in shock to see the large form of Nomu in front of him, completely unfazed by his punch. I didn't even see him move from on top of Aizawa-sensei. The monster grabbed hold of Izuku's arm and flung him over his shoulder, slamming him hard onto the ground. He gasped in pain before being thrown again, this time being sent across the plaza and into a pile of concrete debris. Ho? You're still alive, eh? You're tougher than I expected. That probably would have snapped Eraserhead in half. Shigaraki exclaimed as Izuku slowly dragged himself out from the debris and shakily got to his feet. I like you, kid. You're strong. And that punch you tried to get me with, it kinda reminded me of All Might. Izuku gulped as he took a defensive stance, bearings finally regained. He didn't like where this was going. I bet you're a follower of his. So I bet it would hurt All Might even more if it was you that we killed. Noma! On command, the beast went on the offensive, charging at Izuku with its burly arms raised above its head, fully intent on crushing the teen like a tin can. This time, however, Izuku was ready. Pumping OFA into his limbs, he leapt backwards, narrowly avoiding the blow. Right when he landed, he had to evade once more as the ground beneath him shattered thanks to the downward fist of the Noma. On and on this went, Izuku being barely quick enough to dodge its strikes as he was being pushed back further and further. Damn it! I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I need to counter somehow, and I have to put everything I've got into it or else it won't even put a scratch on him. The last time that he had used an irregularly large amount of OFA's power was against the zero-pointer in the entrance exam. But would that even be enough here? He didn't have many other options at the moment. Here goes nothing. Sidestepping a hook, Izuku morphed into a gorilla and threw a OFA-powered punch right at the bird face of his opponent. The strike sent Noma flying backwards, impacting the far wall with a resounding crash. Slowly panting, Izuku gingerly lifted his once again human arm to see it smoking with a visible red hue up from his forearm to his tricep. Fuck, that hurt. He slowly flexed his arm and winced at the sharp pain shooting up and down his limb. He wasn't sure how much OFA he used instinctively called upon exactly, but it sure hurt like hell. He was lucky his arm wasn't broken at this point. Fighting like this wouldn't last, but he had no choice. He had to hold out until backup arrived or die trying. An animal shape-shifting quirk? You're just full of surprises, kid! Shigaraki almost sounded like a child with how excited he was. So that superhuman strength wasn't your quirk? Or do you have two? Shrugging, he shook his head. Meh, doesn't matter to me. Nomu is gonna tear you to shreds regardless. Said monster had pulled himself out of the impact crater, not a wound or sign of damage anywhere on him. Shigaraki cackled at the look of shock on Izuku's face. Ha, you really think that kind of power is gonna beat Nomu? He was literally created for the sole purpose of killing All Might. It sure is fun to watch you try, though. As the David and Goliath re-engaged in combat, Momo and Tsuyu had just finished tending to Aizawa as best they could. Momo had created a stretcher to carry him on, and she and Tsuyu had put splints on both of his arms. This is about as much as we can do for him right now, Kero. What now, Momo-chan? The raven-haired girl had kept her eyes on Midoriya from the moment he had begun fighting that creature, only taking her gaze off of him to tend to their fallen sensei. Midoriya was losing. It was obvious to see. One of, if not the most capable student in their class was gradually being overwhelmed by that Noma monster. Momo could feel the anxiety welling up within her as she followed the fighting to the best of her ability. What in the world were they going to do? Both of their teachers were defeated, and Midoriya seemed to not be far behind. If the hand-covered villain and his pet decided to turn their attention to her or Ajiri, there was little they could do to defend themselves. They were powerless. She was powerless. Momo-chan, why? She was shaken from her thoughts as Tsuyu jerked her by the shoulders. We have to help, Midoriya-chan. Kero, Momo almost wanted to laugh at her classmate. If only it were some sort of sick and twisted joke. But the look on Ajiri's mostly emotionless face spoke loud and clear. We can't just let him fight that monster alone. He needs help. Midoriya needed help. He was risking his life for them, for their sensei, and for the rest of their classmates. He had come to their aid in a heartbeat, and shouldered the burden of fighting the villains before them. There was no way he could get through this alone. There was no way Momo was going to let him go through it alone. She needed to get her act together. She was here at UA to become a hero that others could depend on. How could she falter at a time like this? Before she knew it, Momo was on her feet, pushing her quirk as fast as it could go. She pulled her creation out of her torso and turned to her froggy classmate. Tsuyu-san, I'm going to need a little bit of help with this. It's quite heavy. Momo had made a freaking bazooka. Tsuyu dumbly nodded and left Aizawa's side to help hold up the back end of the launcher as her classmate took aim. This shoulder-launched multipurpose assault weapon is designed to destroy tanks and military aircrafts, so there's quite a bit of recoil. As the two teenage girls lined up their anti-tank/anti-aircraft rocket launcher, Izuku was slowly losing ground. Thankfully, he hadn't been hit directly with any blows, but the damage to his body and fatigue were beginning to catch up to him. He had to keep increasing his output of OFA as the fight went on just to stand a chance, even with his Omnimorph quirk working in conjunction with it. He was pushing rapidly approaching his limit, and the way things were going, he'd go down well before landing any kind of serious hit on the Noma. He was going to need to wager everything on a Hail Mary. An all-out attack that would end the fight one way or another. Being so engrossed in combat up till this point, Izuku had just noticed his classmates out of the corner of his eye. He would have stood there with his jaw to the ground if he wasn't literally fighting for his life at the moment. He failed to suppress a grin eking its way onto his face, despite still dodging and striking at the Noma. He really hoped they'd be ready soon because shifting in and out of his gorilla state was really draining on him. You don't look too hot, kid! Finally starting to realize just where you stand. Shigaraki had been quietly enjoying the sight of his beast taking on the teen, growing more elated as the scales began to tip in his side's favor. He stopped for a moment, genuinely confused. Wait, why are you smiling, Midoriya-san? His eyes snapped to the two students he had ignored up until now, writing them off as non-threats relative to Izuku. That was definitely a mistake. Izuku took the cue and nimbly rolled between the legs of the Nome. As it turned around, he tossed a handful of dust in its face, causing it to screech and stagger backwards. Taking this chance, he turned into a hawk and flew high into the air. A barrage of rockets impacted the monster not a moment later, the force of the blast shaking the plaza to its very core. Shigaraki cried in outrage as another barrage of missiles zoomed across the plaza and hit the Nomu again, enveloping it in a thick veil of dust and smoke. Reload! Momo quickly produced more ammunition for the launcher, but she and Tsuyu both had to put the weapon down to reload it. Having had to produce such complex materials was quite taxing on the vice-rep, but she did her best to fight through it. Before they could fire off at the Nomu again, a shrieking Shigaraki sped towards them with reckless abandon. They pivoted to take aim at the villain, but he was covering too much ground for them to get a clean shot without being caught in the blast. Die! Shigaraki dove out of the way to avoid both an explosion and a wave of ice aimed right for him. Looking up, he saw his almost assailants standing before him. Damn it, icy hot! Why the fuck are you here? You're in the way! Leave it to Bakugo to find something to loudly complain about, even in a situation of dire circumstances. Izuku landed between his two male classmates and reverted back to his human form. Both Bakugo and Todoroki were both surprised to see the condition that the greenette was in, the former gaping in shock and the latter's eyes widening considerably. Thanks for the help, guys. Izuku put up a brave front, but it was obvious that he was running out of steam. I've been having some trouble dealing with these guys. That thing is here to kill the number one hero. It's understandable that it would be extremely powerful. The ground beneath Shoto's feet began to freeze. We can't let them take out All Might. No shit, dickhead. Deku is getting his ass kicked. Let's kill that fucker and take care of Handy Manny over there after. Shigaraki growled at the students. You brats are really starting to piss me off. Yaoyorozu-san, Tsuyu-chan. Take Aizawa-sensei and get out of here. We'll handle things here. Momo shook her head in protest. Midoriya-san, you can't be serious. You've taken a considerable amount of damage as it is. Let us help you. Her voice died in her throat when Midoriya turned his head to give her the best All Might smile he had. You are helping us. We can handle it. Please, get Sensei out of here. Momo clenched her fists, her eyes screwed shut in frustration. She took several deep breaths, followed by allowing her body to stop tensing. Tsuyu-san, help me carry Sensei. I'll take the front if you can take the back. Tsuyu looked on in concern as Momo dropped her end of the bazooka and grabbed the front handles of the stretcher. Are you sure about this, Momo-chan? Pausing for a moment, she put on a determined look. We have to believe in our classmates. Midoriya-san says that they can handle it. I trust him. Turning to said boy, she looked at him with a stern gaze. Please don't make me regret this choice. He gave her nothing more than a nod, but that simple gesture conveyed everything that she needed it to. She and Tsuyu took off with Aizawa back towards the front entrance, leaving the three boys to deal with Shigaraki and Noma. TCH. I guess chasing after those two makes no difference to me in the end. Killing you three should do just fine. Don't let him touch you. He has some sort of decaying quirk that disintegrates whatever he touches with his hands on contact. Heeding Izuku's warning, Todoroki shot out a large wave of ice aimed at Shigaraki's legs, causing the villain to leap up to dodge it. Taking this opportunity, Bakugo rocketed himself upward and slammed his explosive palm downward. Take this. Despite being able to get his arms up in defense, the nature of Katsuki's quirk circumvented any blocking and the lanky man winced in pain as the explosion propelled him downwards. Recovering in the air, he flipped back onto his feet and scowled. Not bad, brats. But you might be forgetting that I'm the least of your worries. His sinisterly happy tone of voice sickened the boys to their core as Nomu had finally recovered from Momo and Tsuyu's attack. Izuku gasped in shock to see the monster walking towards them despite having several gaping holes in its torso thanks to the rocket barrage. His surprise skyrocketed even further when he saw the wounds begin to heal themselves. Ain't that something? Noma's super regeneration brings him back to full health in seconds. You've got no chance. You think All Might will get here in time to put your dismembered bodies back together? Without warning, Noma's entire body was encased in a sheet of ice. All eyes turned to Todoroki, who let out a frosty breath as he glared down the villain who was intent on ending the symbol of peace. Much to the half-hot, half-cold teen's dismay, the Nomu easily broke free. Enough playing around. Nomu, kill him! With that, the beast let out a loud screech and charged at the three heroes in training. Its speed was almost blinding, and being the only one who had fought it head-on, Izuku grabbed his classmates and rolled out of the way as Nomu came crashing down where they once stood. That thing is way too strong for any of us to beat. We have to do all we can together just to stay alive until help comes. Izuku had been with Katsuki all his life, so he wasn't worried in the slightest that they could work together. No, his doubts lied with the third member of their impromptu team. Todoroki's abilities and strengths were overt, but his standoffish demeanor made it hard to know how well they could synergize. Izuku wasn't too proud or delusional to think that they could get through this without all of them giving their all. Todoroki-kun, you're the only one of us who has any real range. Ignoring the outburst from Bakugo that he had any shortcomings, he locked his emerald eyes with Shoto's heterochromatic ones. Can you give the two of us support while we fight that thing up close? His emotionless face unwavering, Shoto waited a few moments before subtly nodding and turning back towards their enemy. That seems like the best course of action right now. All right, Kaken. You ready for this? Despite the tense aura, Izuku had to stifle a chuckle when he heard Bakugo scoff in derision. The fuck do I look like to you, Deku? Let's blast that bird-brained freak! The pair sprang into battle with the hulking monster, doing their best to stretch out its attention between them as much as possible. When one was dodging an attack, the other would attack from a blind spot. Under most circumstances, this strategy would allow them to beat their opponents easily. But Nomu was a freak of nature in every sense. Izuku was running out of stamina from prolonged fighting, and Katsuki's quirk didn't directly enhance his speed, so the two were losing ground fast. Shit! Narrowly dodging a backhanded swing, Katsuki threw both his arms out in front of him and sent as strong of a blast that he could right at Noma's side. It staggered back a step, creating a window for Rhinozuku to ram it off of its feet. As soon as the beast hit the ground, it was pierced through the limbs by Todoroki's ice, rendering it unable to move. However, its insane healing factor instantly kicked in, allowing it to pry itself off of the ice spikes and get back to its feet. It rushed at the nearest enemy, being Izuku having just gone back to human form. It raised its arms up and attempted to squash the teen, but his partner jumped in and threw an explosive palm into the back of its head. Noma shook off the blow easier than either Midoriya or Bakugo expected, catching the green-haired boy off guard and knocking him back with a strong left jab that just grazed him before he could get out of the way. Deku! Nomu attempted to grab Bakugo, but he was saved by a wall of ice forming between them, trapping large black arm at the elbow. The ash blonde propelled himself around the wall to where his friend was struggling to get up and helped him to his feet. Thanks, Kaken. Gripping his side, Izuku looked over at the Nomu with labored breaths. This isn't looking great, is it? We need some kind of big final push to take that big bitch out. How much you got left in you, dipshit? Ha ha, just about one more. You! Katsuki looked down at his trembling hands, the muscles spasming periodically as a result of using his quirk so often. He honestly wasn't sure he could dish out another explosion at full force without destroying the ligaments in his palms. Luckily, his hero costume was prepared for such an occasion. Katsuki lifted his arms up and shook them slightly, the light sloshing of liquid from inside of the large grenade-shaped gauntlets he was wearing causing Izuku to nod in understanding. He took Katsuki's left gauntlet and fitted it on his own arm, finger ready on the release pin as he aimed the gadget. Well, here goes nothing. The Nomu broke free of the ice and ran at Izuku and Katsuki, swatting away ice attacks from Shoto as it went as if they were mere flies. Wait for it! Nomu was about 50 feet away, still barreling straight towards them through the ice. Todoroki then suddenly altered his plan of attack and froze a patch of the ground below Noma's feet, causing it to falter for a moment in its run. Now! In unison, Katsuki and Izuku pulled the pins off of the weapons, unleashing the full force of the explosive sweat that had collected in them throughout the day. Both blasts made direct impacts to Noma's broad torso, causing the entire area to be enveloped in a blinding light. Momentarily ignoring the excruciating pain that he was feeling in his left arm thanks to the recoil from Katsuki's grenadier bracer, he smiled weakly as he caught sight of Nomu, or rather what was left of Nomu after things settled. Nomu's entire upper half had been blasted away, leaving a pair of legs standing still in the middle of the square like a mannequin displaying a pair of jeans in a department store. Both boys dropped their exhausted arms that had been holding up the bracers and smiled to one another, then glanced over to Todoroki. He still showed no signs of significant emotion, but relief washed over him in the form of his tense shoulders dropping. This small victory party was rudely interrupted by Shigaraki, who was trembling uncontrollably. What at first sounded like uncontrollable wailing turned to intense hysterical laughter as he threw his arms up in the air. Ha! Great shot! You really got him good, huh? That was a critical hit if I've ever seen one. His voice immediately shifted into a calm, gravelly whisper. Too bad this boss has so much HP. Shigaraki's crimson pupils sparkled as a large shadow loomed over Katsuki and Izuku. The two stood shocked, eyes as wide as saucers. They just couldn't fathom that any being could have withstood an attack such as that, literally being blown in half, and somehow recovered in barely a minute. Slowly turning around, they caught a glimpse of the last bits of Noma's shoulder and head reforming, leaving several visible but non-fatal burns across its body. Before they had a chance to react, Katsuki was struck hard with a backhand that sent him flying, coughing up blood and rolling across the ground. Kaken! Izuku tried to run for his friend but instead was grabbed by the arm by Noma. The beast squeezed down on his limb, instantly shattering it despite Izuku attempting to strengthen it with as much OFA as he could muster. Before he could be dealt a fatal blow, Todoroki slid by on a freshly formed patch of ice and stuck his hand onto Noma's back, flash freezing its entire body. Izuku smashed the Goliath's frozen hand to free himself and threw his body as far away as he could, landing a few feet away with a thud. Shoto poured as much into his right side as he could, powering through the frostbite he felt forming along the side of his body. But even then, it wasn't enough. Nomu used its brute strength to pull itself free before the ice could kill its tissue and landed a punch in Shoto's stomach. The stoic teen violently threw up blood and felt several of his ribs shatter before being launched backwards and crashing into the ground next to where Katsuki's battered body laid. Shigaraki resumed his maniacal cackling, eyes wide with psychotic glee. "Now do you see, kid? You never stood a chance." Smiling widely at the sight of Izuku sprawled out on his belly, trying to drag himself to his companions using his one good arm, the villain covered in hands decided that enough was enough. "Now, little hero boy, how's about we let Noma finish off your friends while you watch, powerless to stop them?" And no, stop. Izuku desperately tried to pull out any bit of strength from within himself, but he had nothing left. They had lost. He could feel his consciousness rapidly fading, Noma slowly making its way over to the defenseless Katsuki, and Shoto being the last thing he remembered before everything went dark. Izuku's eyes slowly fluttered open, his brain taking several moments to get going again. He sat up, groggily rubbing his eyes as he looked around him. He had to snap his head around several times to make sure he wasn't seeing things. Well, the problem was, he wasn't seeing things. There was literal nothingness as far as the eye could see in every direction. No Noma. No Kaken or Todoroki. No USJ. Nothing. Izuku wasn't even sure how he was standing, considering the fact that there was nothing below him either. The grayish-white expanse all around him showing no indication that he was moving or standing anywhere in space or time. "Huh!" was his intelligent response to the situation. How in the world was he supposed to proceed when he was essentially standing in an empty void? One of his initial thoughts was that perhaps he had somehow gotten sucked into one of Kurogiri's portals, but he quickly threw out that possibility based on what he had observed from the quirk up to that point. If he was capable of keeping people in some sort of pocket dimension, there would have been no reason that Class 1A would have ended up scattered around the USJ in the first place. He found himself growing frustrated at not knowing where he was or what the hell to do about it, aggressively scratching the green mop of hair on his head. In doing this action, he suddenly realized that his arm that had been snapped by Nomu was as good as new. While he confusedly inspected his healed arm, a faint glow caught his attention out of the corner of his eye. He looked up to see a pair of doors stood floating in nothingness several feet away from him. Curiosity overwhelming caution, Izuku figured that there was nothing else he could do at the moment, and slowly approached the two doors. The first was a large set of double doors that towered over Izuku. It was dark gray in color, framed in what looked to be a gold trim. The numbers 1 to 9 ran down the center of the doors, with all being blacked out except for the 9, which was glowing with crackling green light. There were also 6 thick white chains that hung across the doors, each held together by a similarly colored padlock with a unique symbol on the front of it. The other door caught much more of Izuku's attention, however. It was nothing more than a simple wooden door, some sort of dark timber by the looks of it. What was intriguing about it was the deep scratches that ran diagonally across the door, as if some sort of enormous animal had clawed away at it ferociously. In addition to that, Izuku could hear muffled growling and banging noises from the other sides, coupled with shadows rapidly moving in the crack under the door. For some reason, this door spoke to Izuku, and before he knew it, he was walking up to the door and pulling it open. "What is this?" He had opened a gateway into what looked like a medieval dungeon of some sort. The growling and banging had gotten significantly louder, and it sounded like it was coming from deeper into whatever this was. Taking a few steps into the damp, torchlit corridor, Izuku jumped when the door slammed behind him. He whipped around but was shocked to see that the door was no longer there, leaving him only the option of going down the corridor. After a few minutes of walking, the corridor led into a larger, slightly better lit room. On the walls on either of his sides were several different statues of animals, each intricately carved out of dark stone. At this point, the noise was almost deafening and definitely coming from the other side of the room. Izuku attempted to tap into either of his quirks but strangely found that he couldn't, no matter how hard he tried. Now taking extra caution, he slowly stepped towards the far wall, keeping a defensive stance for whatever might be waiting for him. The room was deceptively large, and Izuku found himself walking for what felt like 10 minutes before he finally got close enough to see what was making the racket. He came upon a large cell that ran across the width of the room, standing between himself and the far wall. It was too dark to see much clearly, causing Izuku to squint hard and peer as far into the cell as he could. His heart almost flew out of his chest when a dark mass slammed against the bars of the cell, growling and snarling at him like a rabid animal, causing him to fall back onto his butt. Gripping his chest in startlement, Izuku looked up at what had scared him, only to stare in shock at his own face on the other side of the cage. Slowly getting to his feet, his eyes never left the occupant of the cell, growing more confused by the minute. This person looked almost identical to himself, only with dark green skin and more pronounced canines that were visible even with his mouth closed. His eyes were also different, having vertically slit pupils that carried an ominous crimson glow behind the usual emerald. Now apparently calm, the almost mirror image smirked and leaned his elbows against the bars containing him. Well, look who finally decided to pay me a visit. What? Who are you? Izuku desperately tried to get his ragged breathing under control, both still feeling the effects of being startled and beginning to lose his composure at the sight before him. Come on, you really haven't figured out who I am? I thought you were supposed to be smart. He waited for a moment, probably hoping that Izuku would respond to the barb, but when no response came, he continued on. Take a look around you. Look at me. What do you see? I see me? Clothes. You're getting warmer, but I feel nice, so I'll just come out and tell ya. Cupping his cheeks with his palms as he leaned into the bars, he gave Izuku a lopsided grin. That badass quirk of yours. You know, the one that lets you transform into a bunch of animals? He stuck a thumb in his own direction. This guy. Izuku felt the gears in his brain slowly chugging along, trying to comprehend the flood of information and interpretations entering his mind all at once, seeing the rapid pupil movement and low mumbling, the cage being chuckled in amusement. Amazing, right? What? Taking a second to calm himself, Izuku let out a deep breath. So you're saying you are Animorph? More or less. He replied with a shrug. But that's kind of a lame-ass name, don't you think? I want something that rolls off the tongue a bit better, you know? Something that captures my awesomeness in all its glory. Like a changeling. Nah. How about Arsenal? No. Gar? Testing the name out on his lips several times, he nodded fervently at his new title. Yes. I am Gar. Okay, Gar-san. Gar. Right, sorry, Gar. Izuku scratched the back of his head. Honestly, I'm still kind of lost as to what exactly is going on. Assuming you are actually my quirk, are all quirks some kind of apparition that their users can talk to? Gar merely shrugged uninterestedly. Dunno. Okay. Well, where are we? Izuku was once again startled when Gar jumped onto the bars, hanging from the metal rods by his hands and feet. Glad you asked? We're in your mind right now. Guffawing at Izuku's once again awestruck impression, Gar pressed forward. Yeah, it's like some sort of visualized spiritual plane in your head or something like that. Not too sure how it works, to be honest, He chuckled sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. This was growing more confusing by the second. The more questions of Izuku's that Gar answered, the more questioned he had. There was a particular thing that was nagging at him, however. Wait, so why are you in that cage? As soon as those words escaped Izuku's lips, Gar's expression darkened. The air in the room grew heavy, and the greenette unconsciously gulped. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Gar's childish and goofy manner had vanished in an instant. He now radiated authority, power, and intimidation. If Izuku could compare it to anything, it was like looking into the eyes of a ferocious predator that was sizing up its next victim. Why am I in this cage? Why am I locked up here like some kind of zoo animal? Why, oh why? Why, Izuku? Gar immediately reined his outburst in, seamlessly returning to his calmer, more calculating tone that somehow made Izuku's skin crawl just as much. There's a whole lot I could tell you about why I'm stuck in this stupid fucking cage, but why don't I show you instead? Gar stuck his hands through two spaces in the bars and held up what looked to be a large lock, the chains connected to it jingling faintly. Izuku's eyes widened when the lock began to glow bright green, with orangish-red markings running all over it. That's ding ding ding! Looks like you figured it out, kiddo! Letting go of the lock, it clanged loudly against the metal bars as Gar stepped back and began pacing back and forth on his side of the cage. You see, things used to be great here for me. I wasn't stuck in this cage or this dingy-ass dungeon room. No. This, he gestured around angrily with his arms. This all happened a couple of months ago, when you went and got a new quirk. Here I was, thinking that you were pretty well off. That we had a good deal going. But no! For some reason, that wasn't good enough for you. You went and got, whatever the hell that fucking thing is. He pointed to the lock of his cage with hatred and disdain. And damned me to this place. Quirks don't just mix together like paint. That damn quirk almost killed me. Although, I guess you can't really call this living, can you? Before Izuku had a chance to respond. Look here, you motherfucker. There's so much I have to say, so much I wish I could do to you, just to give you a taste of what you put me through. Sigh, but we don't have time for that right now. Listen up, I'll cut the shit. That Noma thing. It kicked the shit out of you. It kicked the shit out of you and Bakugo and that bi-haired kid like you were fucking flies buzzing over his lunch. And from what both of us have seen, you can't do anything about it. Before you open your mouth, time in the outside world runs basically at a standstill compared to here, so no, you and they aren't dead yet. But you will be, that is, without me. Izuku had a million questions running through his mind at the moment. Just what was all this? A tangible manifestation of Animorph that seemed to be suffering. Apparently because of One for All no less. He wasn't sure how or why he had triggered this inner mindscape now, or whether or not he'd be able to do it again to try and find out more about it. But all of that fell by the wayside as he looked into Gar's eyes, seeing no trace of insincerity or deceit. He had a way to stop Noma. You'll help me stop that thing? Gar's own piercing stare didn't waver, deep scowl having been replaced by much less intense frown. I'll give you the strength to take that thing on and make it out alive. He then stuck his dark green hand out, extending it to Izuku through the cage. Izuku inspected the hand with hesitation. What's the catch? Gar shrugged. If you die, I die. Not that I particularly like my arrangements right now. I don't feel like biting it just yet. Consider this an investment in my own future. And you're sure you can help me beat Nomu? Giving him an amused grin, Gar turned his palm upwards. Do you got much other choice? Gritting his teeth, Izuku grabbed hold of Gar's hand with his own. Almost instantly, he felt an intense warmth building up within him, starting in the center of his body and quickly radiating out to the rest of his being. He had never felt so energized in his life. The strength he felt welling up within him was almost too much for him to fathom. His skin took on a faint white glow, and as the light emanating from him grew in intensity, he felt himself begin to float into the air. His body slowly began to disappear into thin air, a bright light beginning to fill his vision as the sight of Gar left it down below. As the last of Izuku left the room, so did the light that followed him. Now alone once again, Gar stared up at the spot in midair where Izuku had just been a moment ago. With a sinister glint in his eyes, he smiled widely. An investment in my own future. His smile widened even further when he heard the faint cracking as a small gash appeared on the lock of his cell. I sure hope you'll be ready when I come to cash it in. Up to this point, things had been going a bit less than ideal. Having All Might be a no-show at the USJ was really disappointing, infuriating even. That was the entire point of the entire thing, after all. And now that Kurogyri had allowed one of the students to escape to get help, things became that much more of a pain in his ass. But it wasn't a total loss, Shigaraki mused. Eraserhead would be out of commission for quite some time. The same could be said about 13. Better yet, there were about to be 3 dead children that UA and All Might would have to answer for. If Shigaraki wasn't going to get to physically kill All Might today, an emotional/psychological blow like this would satiate him for the time being. Shigaraki sauntered behind Nomu, both heading towards Bakugo and Todoroki, who still laid sprawled on the ground. It's always more fun to kill them while they struggle and scream, but this'll do. I'll let Nomu deal with you too. That other kid is mine to torture before I kill him. Just as he was about to give Nomu the order to end the 2 defenseless teens, a deep rumbling caused him to stumble off balance, followed by a guttural roar that shook Shigaraki to his very core. Turning around, his eyes almost bugged out of his head. What? He couldn't believe what he was looking at. Towering over them was an enormous anthropomorphic monkey-like creature with a face similar to that of a baboon. Despite having the tail of a monkey, its body and musculature were closer to that of a great ape of some kind, its giant arms larger than semi-tricks. The beast stared down at Shigaraki, baring its razor-sharp teeth in rage. Its solid emerald green eyes holding unbridling amounts of fury directed right at him, and the chimera beside him. Wait. Emerald green eyes. Matching fur. Is this that fucking kid with the animal quirk? What the fuck is this? Standing at around 50 feet tall, the monkey man made Noma look like an ant. Shigaraki unconsciously shivered in fear as it roared once more, now repeatedly slamming its fists against its chest. Hacks! Hacks! This is cheating! Shigaraki screeched as he fearfully backpedaled. Why, you stupid brat! You think that you are gonna win now just cause you got a power-up? Nomu, kill that thing! He yelled as he ran for dear life, taking shelter behind a partially crumbled concrete wall. On command, Nomu charged forward at the beast, leaping up with enough force to leave a deep crater where it had pushed off of the ground. Soaring through the air, Noma threw both of its arms up with intertwined fingers, intending to spike down on the larger beast's face, only to be snatched out of the air like a minuscule insect. The monstrous form of Izuku slammed Noma to the ground, sending a shockwave out in all directions. Before it could peel itself out of the massive crater it was just squished into, Izuku slammed down with his massive foot, crushing it instantly in a gory pool of blood and innards. Shigaraki looked on in abject horror as he witnessed his master's gift to him be split in 2 like a cockroach partially trapped under a glass. The hairy beast roared once more into the ceiling, shattering the glass hanging overhead. He then turned his massive head in Shigaraki's direction. The lanky man paled and stumbled to the ground, resting on his palms, but as he craned his neck up at the ferocious being, he felt himself begin to hyperventilate. This wasn't supposed to be happening right now. He was supposed to be the one in control. This was their assault on Yue and the symbol of peace, but that had been turned on its head as soon as that damn green-haired kid had decided to intervene. And now the hunter has become the hunted. That's a wrap for part 2, my Titans of Time. If you loved this deep dive into Deku's beast mode, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you're the first to catch part 3. Your continuous support means the world to me. You guys are the true legends. Leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below, and stay tuned for more epic content. Until next time, stay legendary. Chronos out.